diagnostic thing that I'm working through all that information. And what I realized is, I come home from work, I got to shower and get all the insulation or chemicals off of me and all that, so you can see the calamine lotion and all that. And sometimes, man, I'm just tired. That's the reality. But the good thing is that I'll be shifted towards more of a day shift for a little bit, so that will help a whole lot. But basically, I'm here until my muscle relaxer kicks in, essentially, because I gotta wake up early in the morning and go to work. So I realized something about my attitude towards my opponent, if you want to call him that, is that by reading his website, for lack of a better word, is pretty inflammatory. It'll get you riled up. And so I was like, I got to change things. So last night, after I went to sleep early, I woke up around 2 a.m. and I started doing debate prep by looking at his previous debate with James Snap Jr. And I know about James Snap. I've been in some of his groups on social media and stuff. Haven't had really much personal interaction with him, except maybe a comment on video or something like that. But anyway, I'm currently going through that video. But I was like, I gotta pull back and somehow make sure that I'm engaging with the material and not just dismissing it because of how inflammatory it sounds. Man, my glasses are all messed up. Anyway, that's another issue. All right, let me share my screen and let me show you how it kind of helped me to get perspective on things. I got the sound low on the ducks because some people are saying it's too loud. I'm probably gonna have to get some better headphones because they seem they're not loud to me. But so anyway, one thing that I did was I went through and I'm like, okay, let's see here, right around here, I went through and I was like, okay, Will Kinney's questions, some of them we've been through, some of them we haven't. And I wrote the main issue on this side. Well, those ducks are so low, I can't even hear them. So unless y'all tell me to turn them down, I'm going to turn them up. Why are they so low? Let's see. Headphones. Volume mixer. More volume settings. I don't see it, but I've noticed there's been a diminish. Yeah, something's wrong with my headset. I'm gonna try to look into maybe get another one. But all right. So we got the first one we looked at was, can God be deceived? And what I did was I wrote what I feel like was the main issue of that issue that he brought up. I think it relates to the context and the consideration of the imperfect in a connotative form, right? Then we went on to, is the Messiah eternal? That's Micah, right? Well, that deals with the intent of the interpretation as well as theology. What is the intent of that passage? Then we went into who controls the world, God or Satan? Once again, I think this even deals with intent and theology. So you're seeing a recurrent thing is you got context, intent, and theology. Example, are the righteous rags Christ or yours? In certain passages. I'm going to fill in the verses later on, but this is just what I was doing. It's like, okay, I need to take a breath back, maybe pull up my nose and get a bird's eye view of everything. Can man speed up the second coming? Do ghosts or the departed spirits exist? Lucifer, a morning star. We weren't able to get that link to work. We'll try again maybe today for that. And we went beyond that. And fornication or immorality. and I actually like the term fornication better than immorality, if it's referred to specific sins. Our pride and boasting Christian virtues, I think we left off with that one. And is it translated as a heretic or divisive person? We're going to look at those today. I think that's what we're going to do. So anyway, I went through and I wrote down all his different, what he calls theological errors. And it resulted in about 39 of them. Okay. So then I started, I haven't blown this up yet, but I started recognizing his agnostic Bible test basically deals with what some people would call contradictions or apparent contradictions. And so I'm working on some of that. I've also been taking notes on the Snap debate. I got the screenshots for the textual criticism stuff of Snap. Snap's a little hard to understand, but I mean, far as speaking wise, I think he got over a stroke. In addition, I think, is he British or I'm not sure what he is, but anyway, his PowerPoints are great. I like his PowerPoints a lot. I can follow his arguments. And so, you know, I'm taking notes on all their stuff, their interaction, just showing y'all what I've been up to. So y'all don't think, oh, I've just been coming in here doing a debate prep and then canceling it, or coming in and doing a debate prep until I fall asleep and then not really getting into the issues. I want y'all to see that the other thing I did was this is going to be my working cover sheet for whenever I'm analyzing Will Kinney's page. Essentially what I've noticed is that whenever he's dealing with these theological issues, what he'll do is he'll give a brief translation listing the King James verse. Then he'll make a statement about context and the content, right? Comments on that. Then he'll use about 4 different old commentaries. Then he'll mention translations prior to the 1611, agreeing with the 1611. And then he'll talk about translations after the 1611, agreeing. And then he'll mention online resources that support these things. Hey, Christ is the truth. Then he'll mention forged language Bibles. He'll mention some other versions. He'll mention the problem of the reading, what the real issue is. Then he'll go in about the Catholic version thing. Then he'll mention the Septuagint, and then he'll give a summary of the theological error. Yeah, I had to push it back to 10:30 because I've been working, and then I have to shower to get the chemicals off of me. And insulation this time. Hey, God the Son, Jesus Christ saves. So this is going to be we're going to keep adapting this, but this seems to be the general structure. Now, this is my concern because I noticed this in his debate with Snap. I don't know if he's Dr. Snap or what, but in that debate, what Will Kinney would do is he'll start reading from his website in the middle of the debate. And I hope he doesn't do that in my discussion with him. I mean, it's not a debate, but I mean, it's a discussion. I mean, I can read his website, but you listen every time a translation sides with the King James or sides against the King James and what languages and all that. I only need the information that is necessary to basically establish what you're trying to show. His claim is that the other translations create theological error or support theological error. And so if that be the case, then you just show me why the King James reading is superior and why I should believe that particular aspect of theology. You know, and I think some of that is theological assumptions. And I know it's difficult, but I try not to do my theology first. So some of this has to do with methodology. So because I'm looking for certain things, that's going to help me limit other information. It's not really necessary. Now, am I going to miss some things? Absolutely. But I think I'm getting enough exposure to learn a little bit more from him, you know, before I get into the discussion. So let's follow. Let me stop sharing for a second. Down. Watch how psychological this is, guys. When I dim the light, the lights in the background are brighter, and because it's darker. Watch what happens to the numbers. And plus, I'm full screen. Just little things that you recognize happen. All right, so I'm pulling up his email. That we go to his website. I go to his website that way because, as y'all know, his website is infested with Trojans, and my Avast software can handle it, but all right. No, I don't work in media. No, I just God blessed me with some things that some stuff. A Christian brother went into a business and he bought a lot of this stuff to do a commercial, and then the business folded, and he donated the light kit and all of that stuff to me, as well as other things. So, you know, God provides in his own way. All right. So we'll check the Lucifer one, see if it's working today. Say this link is not working. Wait. Something might be working on it. Turn black. Right, and see, Josh, see, I'm not against the King James. I'm just having the discussion because people want me to have the discussion. I'm not against the King James. But I think a lot of the issues where people try making arguments for the King James have more to do with theology than they do with the actual translation. So yeah, the Lucifer Morning Star one isn't working. We've already done the fornication. Rejoice or be proud. To me, this all has to do with tone, okay? Basically the idea is when Paul uses the term boast, is it a neutral term? Or in other words, there's positive things you can be proud about or boast about, and are there negative things you can boast and be proud about, or is all boasting sin? You know, I like to treat a word as having a usage. Hey, King's Table. And so what I would do is I'd always ask, well, boast in what sense? Proud in what sense? You know, that's my approach. Or rejoice in what sense? And go from there. I don't think we need to go over that one. Look, that link isn't even working. Look at that, guys. All right, let's try the heretic or divisive person. Well, I remember, I've never checked this out, but one claim was that the word heretic just means choice. And I first heard that in 2005, before I ever studied languages or anything like that. And then I've also read people mention that the term was not negative theologically at first, you know. Josh C says, I'm not against the KJV either. I personally use the New King James because of the Old English can be hard to follow, and certain words are not used in the same way there today. Plus the thee and thou. Yeah. Thee and thou. All right, let's try this one. We got one that works. Titus 3:10, heretic or divisive person. King James Bible. A man that is a heretic after the first and second admonition reject, knowing that he that is such is subverted and sinneth, being condemned of himself. ESV. As for a person who stirs up division, after warning him once and then twice, have nothing more to do with them, knowing that such a person is warped and sinful, he is self-condemned. All right. He says, I recently was in a discussion about the infallibility of the Bible with a group of Christians who use the modern Vatican version. See what I mean about the inflammatory language? Like the ESV, NIV, NSB, and one of the members called me a heretic because I believe the King James Bible is the complete, inspired, and infallible words of God. Here's my issue. All right? I'll just go ahead and say this. I'm a selective cessationist, which means I don't believe that there are any apostles and prophets. Furthermore, I also believe that the only way that one received revelation, inspired revelation, was if there were apostles and prophets in existence. The Bible is complete, and so I don't believe that there can be any inspiration or infallible communication going on after the first century. So this makes me skeptic of this type of argument for the King James. If you want to argue according to preservation, that's a different issue. Providential preservation or something like that. But whenever you're claiming that the translation is inspired, that's essentially, and I know people ain't gonna like this comparison, but that's essentially the Pope. The Pope is infallible in matters of doctrine and faith. That's the claim of the Catholic Church. But in order to believe everything that the Pope says in those areas, you have to assume that the Pope actually had succession, apostolic authority. And so I think that this form of King James, and I don't know the exact nuances of it, but this type is more like the Catholic form, and maybe some of the others are more like the Orthodox form, where they're not assuming inspiration or infallibility. Right. Okay. He was also using his ESV to tell us that I was being divisive and that people should not have anything to do with me. I then pointed out to him they had labeled me a heretic because I believe God has actually given us a complete and infallible Bible we can hold in our hands. Read and believe is 100% true words of God. And see, this is another thing. Complete. Yeah, it's complete. Here, I'm probably crazy for doing this, but I'm going to reveal some of my sources that I'm going to use. All right. So this was my professor for theological method, Dr. Stollard. Yeah, I want to get there. Here, let me go this way. He's the head of the Council of Dispensational Hermeneutics, last I checked. So if you're bashing dispensationalism, I suggest you check that out. But I had him for theological method, prolegomena, and so he's done. You go right here, biblical studies. You go to translations, and you got textual criticism right here. Okay. Thanks, God the Son. I'll check that out. There's a statement about the controversy over the Alexandrian text. Let me see. I got documents I could pull up. Let's go to the translation section. No, that's not it. Maybe the systematic theology underneath bibliology. Yeah, inerrant review, the clarity of scripture, inerrancy of the major prophets, review. No, that's not it. I just didn't want to share anything. All right, give me a second, guys. I'm going to share my stuff. I'm eventually going to put this into proper in my own formatting, but I think that this will help. Okay, I was just looking at this the other day again. All right. Let's see here. Oh, no, that's not it. Let me just type his name in. Are you serious? Okay. Myths and mistakes in New Testament criticism. No, that's not it. I just downloaded these again. I'm gonna have to change sort by date or group by date and go earlier this week. Come on. May just have to go to the website and get it. Let me go to recent. Sorry, guys. Go to my Google Drive. Okay. There's the Alexandrian text. KJV. Preservation and translations. All right. Let's start here. Because my point is, I'm not sure I'm going to argue for preservation. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I'm probably not going to take that route. All right. Preservation translations. This is Dr. Stoller. Bibliography, he mentions Randall Price. This is somebody that's tied to my seminary, and he's actually on a board at a school that SFT also does stuff with. Geisler and Nix, Frank Gabeline, Glassman. All right, so listen to this. One of the most controversial areas of theology that I've dealt with in the 30 years or so that I served as a pastor in a local church is the issue of translations. Of course, in modern times, the issue has been the so-called superiority or even inspiration of the King James Bible. By inspiration here, I mean the belief that the Anglican translators of the King James were picked up and carried along by the Holy Spirit to write the words in the 1611 translation in the same way that Moses, Isaiah, Matthew, John, and Paul were moved by the Spirit. Even though we are discussing the issue here under bibliology, which is fine, the real area of theology that I believe this view fits is ecclesiology. I wrote a paper in the early 1990s for Dr. Laner Burns, DTS, in a PhD independent study at DTS entitled The Significance of the Central Motif in Stratification for Method, a case study of landmark Baptist theology. And I have that paper as well. In that paper, I make this comment. There is the zealous propagation of the idea that the King James Version of the Bible is the only inspired version in existence. Reliance upon original text and textual criticism is usually ignored, and the movement of the Holy Spirit upon the translators of the King James is assumed. This view is secondarily an issue in bibliology. It is primarily an issue of ecclesiology. It is the tradition of the churches which is being elevated. This is in harmony with the landmark emphasis upon the church as the focal point for all thinking. Therefore, it is not surprising to see many churches which have been infected with landmarkism verbally or practically demonstrate that they believe that the preservation and inspiration merged together in the King James 1611. Of course, my experience with this movement is because I pastor the independent Baptist churches where a large number hold a KJV only position. The other group where you find this view is classical Pentecostalism, but for different reasons. The KJV has certain passages such as Paul talking to the disciples of John the Baptist in Acts 19:2. Have you received the Holy Ghost since you believe? Which tend to support a second blessing experience that fits Pentecostal theology and practice. As a result, they do not want to give up the King James Version. As we will see below, the issue of which translations are inspired, in fact, the entire theme of inspiration in translations, is not an issue that exists only for post-1611 Christians. Many Christians throughout history, and even Jewish believers before Christ, have struggled with the questions and have labeled single translations as inspired in the same way the original text was inspired. It is important to wrestle with these questions as part of our Christian worldview, theology, but we should also have a hefty respect for how translations have served to preserve the Word of God in history. Just as the transmission of manuscript evidence helped to preserve the Bible, remember the 105, I'll bring this up in a little bit. But basically what he argues is we're not trying to find out, it's not that we have 95% of the Bible and we're trying to find out the 105. So no, the reality is that we have 105% of the text and we're trying to find out the 5% that's not authentic. But anyway, translations have also been part of God's way to preserve his word. Our wrap up at the end of these notes will ask some serious questions to help to frame our very definition of preservation of the Bible. Ancient translations. Early Greek translations of the Old Testament. So this is making a comparison between the Septuagint, which was a translation. I don't even believe it was inspired. Which was a translation to the King James stuff. Early Greek translations of the Old Testament. Origen's Hexapla used at least 4 Greek manuscripts of the Old Testament. Thus, there's no lack of Greek evidence of the Old Testament texts in ancient times. Septuagint. The most important Greek translation by far is the Septuagint, because it was the primary Bible for the earliest Christians. The New Testament more often quotes from the Septuagint than a Hebrew Bible. The Septuagint is also used heavily by the first century Jewish writers Josephus and Philo. The word Septuagint is the Latin word for 70. The Roman numeral LXX says the same thing. The name comes from a rounding of number in the letter of Orestes, dated somewhere in the 3rd or 2nd century BC. This letter, with highly legendary content, is in some lists of the Pseudepigraphia. Orestes claimed that there was a request from Ptolemy II 285 to 246 BC, to the Jewish high priest Eleazar to obtain 6 elders from each of the 12 tribes. Obviously, no belief in the lost 10 tribes here. Hold on. To work on Greek translations of the Hebrew Bible to put in the library at Alexandria. This means 72 translators. The number was rounded to 70 and attached to the name to the Greek translation. The Greek translation is the oldest Greek translation that we have. As we saw earlier, the Septuagint contains not only the books of the Masoretic text, but also the Apocrypha. It is normally dated from about 250 to 150 BC. So obviously there were not 72 translators who worked through the entire text in a translation over a 100-year span. Some scholars say longer. This puts a lie to one of the traditions that sprang up around the Septuagint. The proposed theory was that the 72 translators all worked independently and came up with the exact same translation. This was considered by some to be proof of God's divine approval and inspiration of the Septuagint. Many Christians of the early church, whether accepting this view or not, believed it was wrong to translate from the Hebrew to get the Old Testament in another language. It should be translated from the Greek Septuagint. Augustine objected to Jerome's work on the Latin Vulgate on the ground that Jerome used the Hebrew text. Augustine appears to toy with the idea that the Septuagint was inspired, not the Hebrew text that was available, although there are times when he affirms both. But notice this quote from his work on Christian doctrine. Even if things are found in Hebrew codices that differ from what the 70 have put, in my judgment, they should give way to what divine providence has achieved through these men. This shows high regard for the translators of the Septuagint. While the Septuagint is extremely useful to us for Bible study of both Testaments due to New Testament quotes, there are problems with this translation. I will not go into great detail, but will assert one example to show that it's impossible to argue for the Septuagint as a complete 100% inspired text. The example I have in mind is the famous account of Methuselah possibly living through the flood. This is highly debated. If you do the math on the dates given relative to the grand old saint, the Septuagint dates have him living several years after the flood. If the Septuagint is correct on this, Methuselah either swam in the water for over a year or he was on Noah's Ark, which the text, even the Septuagint, says he is not. Chronology in the Genesis genealogy is the major area of debate involving the Septuagint. Aquila's Greek translation. This translation is sometimes dated around AD 130 to 40. Only fragments of this translation remain to us today, although we know that Origen, who died in 254, used it as part of his Hexapla in the next century at the school of Alexandria. Aquila appears to be a Jewish proselyte, not Christian. According to the Talmud, Aquila was also called Onkelos, and is often considered the author of well-known Targum Onkelos, an Aramaic Targum on let me get some more ice water. Hold on. Let me see if I could put my rapper voice on a little bit. It makes it easier to read. All right, so Theodosius' Greek translation. This translated, dated around AD 150 and is included in the Hexapla. It's also quoted by the Shepherd of Hermas and Justin Martyr a little later in the 2nd century. Of particular interest is that Theodosius' translation of Daniel is considered closer to the Hebrew, that is the Septuagint. Jerome hinted that Theodosius was a superior text in the particular book. According to scholars, there's uncertainty to what level he's translating Hebrew, and Daniel he appears to be, or if he is just updating the Septuagint. Symmachus' Greek translation. This translation, also contained within Origen's Hexapla, is usually dated sometime in the late 2nd century AD. There is some debate about who Symmachus is. Some Christian sources calling him an Ebonite Christian, a heretical group that denied the deity of Jesus, while others called him a Samaritan who converted to Judaism. Regardless, his tradition His translation must have been well received, since it's not long after that he appears in Origen's work. Symmachus, Greek, is thought to be mostly free of Hebraisms and to be better Greek than the Septuagint, Aquila, or Theodotion. Jerome uses his translation to help him with the Latin Vulgate translation, early Latin translations, the Old Latin version. Apparently, there were several translations of the Bible early on. A special note is what is called the Old Latin version, which was probably translated in the 2nd century. Some church fathers seem to quote from this version. The Old Testament appears to be a translation of the Septuagint and not of the Hebrew text. Hence, it's a translation of a translation. It contains the Apocrypha and may have been the source that caused Jerome reluctantly to put the Apocrypha in his Vulgate translation. The translation contains most of the New Testament as well, with many manuscripts and fragments surviving. Notice the following quote from Geisler. While no codex of the entire New Testament is extant, the manuscript witnesses date from the 4th to the 13th centuries, and thus indicate the Old Latin version continued to be copied long after it had been replaced by the Vulgate in general use. Jerome's Latin Vulgate. It is impossible to overstate the value of Jerome's Latin Vulgate to the Roman Church in the Middle Ages. Jerome, 342 to 420, did the translation in response to a request from the Bishop of Rome. The goal was to stop confusion of Latin translations, since so much variation existed at the time. A similar reason behind the later KJV English translation. Jerome translated the Bible into Latin from 382 to 405. Although ongoing revisions were made, he used Hebrew texts and Origen's exemplar available to him to work on the OT and did not slavishly follow the Septuagint. While each of this work was done in Rome from 386 to 420, he lived in Bethlehem, the birth city of Jesus, where he studied Hebrew. The translation over time became the official translation of the Roman Catholic Church. Note this decree from the Council of Trent, 1545, cited in Geisler. Moreover, the same sacred and holy synod considered that no small utility may accrue to the Church of God if it be known which out of all the Latin editions now in circulation of the sacred books is to be held as authentic, ordains and declares that the said Old and Vulgate edition, by which the lengthy usage of so many ages have been approved of in the Church, be in public lectures, disputations, sermons, and expositions held as authentic, and that no one is to dare or presume to reject it under any pretext whatsoever. Thus, it's not possible theoretically to speak against the Latin Vulgate in the Roman Catholic Church circles. During the Reformation, it was often taught by RCC adherents that Jerome was controlled by the Holy Spirit in the translation process, although there was no unanimous understanding, e.g. Erasmus. Other ancient translations. Samaritan Pentateuch. This is not really a translation in the purest sense, although it's often placed in the Bible handbooks in the section on translations. The reason for that is that it's not standard Hebrew. Instead, the text is in the Samaritan alphabet, which comes from the Paleo-Hebrew manuscript used before the Babylonian captivity. The date for its writing or translation is usually given at 122 BC. It only contains the Pentateuch. A small portion of Joshua can be found as non-canonical. The Samaritans consider this translation the inspired word of God handed down through Moses. Syriac Peshitta. This translation, as the name implies, is a translation into Syriac or Aramaic. The word Peshitta means simple. Some parts of the Peshitta follow the Masoretic text, while other parts show the influence of the Septuagint on the translation. It is generally dated between the mid-2nd to early 3rd centuries. AD. Scholars think that the translation was done in the region of Edessa in Upper Mesopotamia. The translation contained both the Old and New Testament. Other Syriac versions of the Bible exist as well, although this is the most well-known translation. Coptic versions. There are several different Coptic translations of the Bible that can be traced to the 3rd and 4th centuries. In the New Testament, they all follow the Alexandrian text type. After all, they're Egyptian texts. However, some follow the Western text type in the Gospels and Acts. The Old Testament translations often follow the Septuagint, the English Bible. Okay, so now we're getting into this part. I'll read y'all's comments later on whenever I'm studying. I got to keep moving, guys. I'm not ignoring y'all. I know y'all are doing y'all's thing over there. Of course, for most of us, English is our primary language. Thus, we may have a greater interest in the development of English translations of the Bible. It is important that seminary students review this information at least once. John Wycliffe, 1331 to 1384. A priest in England during the 14th century, Wycliffe was a precursor to the Reformation. He advocated translation in the vernacular instead of the continued use of Latin. Wycliffe, with a team of translators, produced what has been called the Wycliffe Bible that was completed in 1384, that is before the printed press. He argued strongly for sola scriptura. He is credited as the first man to produce a complete Bible in English with the help of his team. William Tyndale, 1494-1536. The Englishman, William Tyndale, was the first to aggressively work at translating and printing the Bible in English using the Greek and Hebrew text as a basis. Luther's translation in German, New Testament 522, Old Testament added 1534, was stoking fires of translation into vernacular languages. Tyndale's English version, 1526, partial Old Testament through 1536, was partly the basis for Matthew Bible, 1537, translated by Tyndale, Coverdale, and Rogers. Notice that Tyndale does not live to see this published. Tyndale was strangled to death and burned at the stake. Miles Coverdale, 1488 to 1569. Coverdale, briefly a bishop in the Anglican Church, was ardent in translating the Bible into English. In 1535, he published his own English Bible. It was probably based partly on the work of Tyndale. They were collaborative workers. This is the first full translation of the English Bible ever published. Coverdale was part of the effort that led to another similar English Bible to be translated in 1537, the Matthew's Bible mentioned above under the discussion on the Tyndale. Matthew's Bible, 1537. As we've seen above, this was the joint work of Tyndale, Coverdale, and John Rogers, published in 1537. This is the second complete Bible published in English. Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, stated this was the best translation in English that he had seen. However, there were many notes in Matthew's Bible and some of the other Bibles that were stinging criticisms of the Roman Catholic Church. Oftentimes, this prevented their use in church worship, especially in the Anglican Church at this time, since it's still associated with the Roman Church. The so-called Great Bible, 1539. The Great Bible got its name because of its large publication size. Remember that this is the second generation that had printed press, so new and different things sometimes get attention. This Bible translation was overseen by Coverdale. This attempt was made to do away with the harsh notes, especially against the Catholics. The King of England, Henry VIII, authorized this translation, hence is sometimes called the first authorized version. It had some popularity since 7 editions were made in 2 years, from 1539 to 1541. Geneva Bible, 1560. By now the reader should notice the flurry of English translation activity. In 1560, a new translation called the Geneva Bible was published. The Bible translation was prepared by the more Calvinistic and Protestant reformers who were exiled in Geneva during the days of the Catholic Queen Mary, 1553-1558, I think that's Bloody Mary, was prohibited during readings of scripture. But in 1560, these men presented their translation to the new Queen Elizabeth, Elizabeth I, who maintained a Protestant posture. The Geneva Bible contains some anti-Catholic language in the notes, harkening back to some earlier habits. This was the Bible of the Pilgrims who came to America, who rejected the KJV because they did not trust anything associated with King James. Bishop's Bible, 1568. This English translation became the official Bible used in the Anglican Church during Elizabeth's reign. It was first published in 1568 and updated off and on with the final edition in 1633. It was considered the baseline for development of the King James translation of 1611. In 1571, it was ordered that the house of all bishops and that all cathedrals, generally the seat of bishops, would have copies of the Bible. King James Version, 1611. The King James Version was authorized by King James of England, was completed in 1611. The need for yet another translation at the time stemmed generally from the proliferation of English Bibles among the English people. Particularly, there was a disconnect between home and church. The Geneva Bible was generally used in the homes of English folks, while the Bishop's Bible was used in the churches. There was a desire to have a Bible that would be properly used by both home and church. It was to be elegant enough to be read aloud, especially for church, but to be clear enough to be enjoyed by everyday people in their homes. This was the translation by lower committees who reported to a final committee. All in all, as many as 47 translations may have worked on its beginning in 1604. It was not a single person translating like the Tyndale and Coverdale Bibles. It was published in 1611 with no notes, but marginal alternate readings, and received criticism for the fact its elegance, however, has led to its multi-century use even to the present day. I have personally seen the third edition 1616 KJV. There have been several editions and updates of the KJV, contrary to opinions of KJV only proponents. The Oxford edition of 1769 is the baseline for all the major printings since that time. The original KJV contained the Apocrypha, and that's why David Preston goes with that. In 1666, according to one source, publication without the Apocrypha began. In the Americas, the KJV with Apocrypha continued to be printed until 1782. Some modern English translations. Revised versions or English revised versions. New Testament 1881, Old Testament 1885, Apocrypha 1894. This version was an attempt to revise the KJV. On the translation committee were B.F. Westcott and H.J. Hort. They were opposed by others, including John Bergen. American Standard Version 1901. This version, the ASV, is officially the Revised Version, Standard American Edition. For a few decades, this is the standard version used in the seminaries in the USA. The work on this translation began in 1880 to revise the KJV. Revised Standard Version 1952. The RSV was an attempt to revise the ASV of 1901. It is sometimes called by some conservatives the Revised Standard Perversion. The reason for this is partly because the RSV was published under the auspices of the Liberal National Council of Churches. One specific problem area in the translation of the Hebrew to mean young woman instead of virgin in Isaiah 7:14. Berkeley Version in Modern English, New Testament 1945, Old Testament added 1959. This translation was an effort to have a modern language translation in English in light of the archaic nature of the KJV at the time. New Scofield Bible 1967. While the Old Scofield Bible 1909-1917 strictly followed the KJV, the New Scofield, sometimes called the Scofield Reference Bible too, actually changed some of the archaic words in the KJV in brackets with marginal notes. New English Bible, New Testament 1961, Old Testament added 1970. The NEB was intended as a replacement of the English Revised Version cited above. The translation philosophy was dynamic or functional equivalent rather than formal equivalence. New American Standard Bible, New Testament 1963, Old Testament added 1971, revision in 1995. Later text revisions were published in 1997, 1995, and 2020. The recently published Legacy Standard Bible 2021 is the latest revision. The NSB translation usually follows formal equivalents similar to the KJV. Jerusalem Bible, Roman Catholic translation, 1966. This Catholic translation in the English contains 73 books, includes the Apocrypha. It has been heavily used in the Catholic churches for the reading of Scripture in the English-speaking world, not counting the U.S. The translation is part of a growing tendency in RC circles to translate the Bible from Greek and Hebrew rather than the Latin. Good News Bible, New Testament, 1966, Old Testament added, 1973. The translation of the New Testament was originally published under the name Good News for a Modern Man. It has also been known as Today's English Version, TEV, but the name was changed and finalized in 2001. This is generally a dynamic or functional equivalent translation. New King James, New Testament, 1979, Full Bible, 1982. This translation is the update of the KJV. It uses the Stuttgart Biblica Hebraica for the Old Testament and the Texas Receptus for the New Testament. It also uses the New Text too. Yeah, it mentions it down there. 130 translators were involved. It appears to be largely evangelical production. It was told by Zane Hodges that the committee wanted to base the New Testament not on the TR but on the development Hodges Farstead majority text. He told them no because his edition of the Greek edition had not been tested by the scholars yet. New American Bible, NAB, Roman Catholic Translation, 1970, revised 1986 and later dates. This translation has been used primarily in the United States. The Living Bible, 1971. This technically is not a translation but a paraphrase done by one man, Kenneth Taylor. It is based on the ASV of 1901. New International Version, NIV, NT, 1973, Old Testament, 1978, revisions of 1984 and 2011. A group of around 15 scholars translated this version from the Hebrew and the Greek text. It is perhaps the best-selling version at the present time, has been for a while. The translation philosophy attempts to balance formal equivalence with functional equivalence. It appears to be more thought for thought than word for word. Contemporary English Version. CEV NT 1991, Old Testament added 1995, Apocrypha 1999. This version is published by the American Bible Society. It's an attempt to have a Bible that can be read by those who have a lower reading level. Editions of this translation without the Apocrypha are available. I have one. New Testament, New Living Translation, NLT 1996. The version began as an effort to update the Living Bible in 1971. However, as the title implies, it's not a paraphrase, but a legitimate translation. However, it attempts to keep the style of the Living Bible. World English Bible, WEB 2000. This is the updated version of the ASV 1901. It is a public domain text freely disseminated through electronic means. It also uses the resources of the Greek majority text and the Hebrew Stukartensia, as well as some of the Dead Sea Scrolls. To my knowledge, there are no print copies of this translation. ESV 2001. More than 100 scholars and pastors participated in the translation process for this version. The translating committee appears to be heavily weighted toward men who are reforming the theology and hermeneutics. The translation is gaining in popularity. New English Translation, the Net Bible, 2006. This was an effort by several scholars to have a free study Bible available online. Its notes are substantial. There are now printed copies which can be purchased. The translation is a brand new translation and not an update of the existing translations. This means they go directly to the Hebrew and Greek text. The translators advertise the Net Bible as non-sectarian, interdenominational, and evangelical. Common English Bible, CEB 2011. This translation was done by over 100 scholars from 24 different denominations. No real conservative groups in the bunch. Some Reformed Jewish people were part of the translation committee. The Apocrypha is included. It uses a combination of functional and formal equivalents. Christian Standard Bible, CSB 2017. This translation is a revision of the Holman Christian Standard Bible 2009. Although the translations came from different denominations, it appears that the Southern Baptist churches are the biggest users of this particular Bible. The Israel Bible, Old Testament only, 2018. This is the English and Hebrew text and parallel columns edited by Rabbi Tuli Wise. The word Yahweh is translated throughout as the name, the Hashem. There is a minimal commentary by Orthodox rabbis and footnotes for the Bible. Now we finally get to the KJV only movement. All right. As I mentioned in an earlier lecture, in the first draft of my master thesis at DTS, I had designated this as the KJV cult. Ouch! Zane Hodges made me change that to the KJV movement because of the many fine people in the KJV only camp. However, the worst part of that movement certainly acts in a cultish way when it comes to the text of the KJV. This is seen in the sometimes rejection of all other translation efforts and opinions that all other translations attack precious doctrine and are the devil. However, we may be careful since there are levels to this movement. That is, there is a spectrum within the view of exceptionalism with respect to the KJV translation. Alright, so here's the view. One of them. KJV is the preferred Bible due to tradition. Alright, let's do a poll, guys. Start a poll. Create poll. Ask question. Are you KJV only, preferred, or non-KJV? All right. Well, oh, you got to add another option. Are you KJV only? Yeah, let's see. KJV only. KJV preferred. I can't even spell preferred. P-R-F-E-R. Forgive me if I misspelled. And then non-KJV. All right. Here we go. So there's the poll, guys. How do I vote? Am I allowed to vote? All right. We'll see what's going on there. KJV is the preferred Bible due to tradition. All right. KJV is the preferred Bible due to tradition. So there's a spectrum, you know. James White also has a list. But let me just, all right, so let's say you got KJV O inspired. Okay. All right. Then you got KJVO. We'll just say providentially preserved. And we could have KJVO tradition. Okay. And then you can have, well, let's put KJV. I'll change these later. I'm just making some categories. Preferred. So I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4 possibilities before we ever get any further. Okay. There's more. I know there's more, but those are the ones that are coming to my head. So here he deals with the KJV is the preferred Bible due to tradition. I believe that this tradition became entrenched in the 19th century when the British Empire expanded greatly around the world. There developed the idea of the white man's burden to carry truth to the entire masses of the world, which included the popularity chosen Bible, the KJV. So some folks are married to the inherited tradition. So basically what he's arguing there is that it's Anglo-Saxonism dominance, you know, that is a result why a lot of people think the KJV is preferred. It's an interesting idea. You just put a note. I'll just put white man. White man's burden. Come back to that. KJV comes from the best original language manuscripts. Okay. So this one is, let's call this one. Hey. Let's call this one KJV manuscripts, right? And so maybe you could have KJV only manuscripts, but this would be like TR, I think, or it could be majority text, or Hodges Farstad, or the Pierce Pierpoint, or whatever it's called. There's two of these. Anyway, we'll keep going. All right, KJV comes from the best original languages. Masoretic text for Old Testament, TR for New Testament. Sometimes it's hard to tell if someone holds to the TR because that is where the KJV comes from, or if someone holds to the KJV because it's based on the TR. The difference here is profound. If someone holds that the Masoretic text and TR are the best manuscript tradition, I can respect that view. Okay. However, I don't respect holding to the TR because that is where the KJV comes from. That is an English first option. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Then we got KJV is inspired and corrects mistakes in the Hebrew and Greek manuscripts. KJV only inspired and corrects manuscripts. KJV is inspired and corrects mistakes in the Hebrew and Greek manuscripts. This is the most radical of the proposals of the KJV supremacy. It is the brainchild of Peter Ruckman, 1921 and 2016. He advocated the following. The KJV is advanced revelation from God. 2. The school of Alexandria, 3rd century, corrupted the Greek manuscripts for theological reasons. He refers to this as the Alexandrian cult. 3. Let me take a heartburn pill. Second. Damn. All right. God had to step in and preserve his true word, which he did in 1611 in the translation of sequestered publication of the KJV. God corrected the mistakes that had crept into the manuscripts by means of the KJV. The Anglican translators of the KJV were carried along by the Holy Spirit to produce the translation in the same way that Moses, Isaiah, Matthew, John, and Paul were. 6. Those who disagree with this view are considered to some degree to be heretics. I hope Will Kinney is not that extreme. Let me just type in his name next to Ruckman and see what happens. Okay, you got James White bringing up this. Let's look at this. Well, Will Kinney got his 15 minutes of fame today. Okay, 12 minutes, 19 seconds to be exact. I started out the program explaining the situation related to erasement problems and accurately obtaining the text of the book of Revelation, went over what the King James only controversy says on the issue, including the footnotes containing relevant information, and then played Mr. Kinney's comment from the video linked below. Then I brought Mr. Kinney on, and well, you just have to listen for yourself. Only where do you encounter this level of religiously induced irrationality. I've seen it often in Muslims, Osama Abdullah, Nadir Ahmad, Etisham, Gulam, Mormons, Stan Barker, Louis Migley, Carrie Shirts, Roman Catholics, Art Sippo, and yes, even atheists. Atheisms can become tremendously religious in nature, but KJV onlyism seems to attract these kinds of folks. Just look at the likes of Peter Ruckman, Gail Rippler, Sam Gipp, Stephen Anderson, and now Will Kinney. An amazing exchange with a man who simply refuses to acknowledge facts and logic. A sad insight into the strange circular world of cultic King James onlyism. After we had enough of Mr. Kinney's wild circular thinking, we moved on to continuing our response to Phil Fernandez's opening statement. He's the one that does fire something apologetics opening statement, and then in the last half hour, continued response to Roger in his debate with Matt Slick, another 90 minutes. Okay, so I'll look at this in the future, but I don't know who Jonathan Burris is. but responding to Will Kinney and BrainPluckWebs.com. So they've been going back and forth, addressing the Bible agnostic thing, the absolute standard. You know, there's these things like that. I'm not going to get into this. I'm not going to take up someone else's battle. But I do want to see if the name Ruckman comes up. Or will you claim one of the Peter Ruckman? Okay. I want to know TexasReceptus.com. Is that Nick Sayers? Who is that? Oh man, y'all gotta update y'all stuff. Let's see. All right. I'm gonna look in the chat. Maybe some of y'all know. That poll thing is blocking my. I can't see everything. That's not cool. All right. I'm looking to see if y'all mentioned where does Will Kinney line up with Ruckman? Okay. I don't see anybody commenting. If you did comment and you already placed it, retype it in. All right. So where are we now? Okay. So how should we respond to this? All right. In this scheme, so he's talking about how you should respond to the Ruckman version. In this scheme, God actually failed to preserve his word from the 3rd century to 1611. God allowed centuries of believers not to have his faithful word. Why is God obligated today for them to have the preserved word? Yeah, if God allowed for these people to not have the preserved word during that time, why should they have it now? Where in the Bible does it predict any inspiration of a future translation of the New King James Version? Note that this means that this particular view is an extra biblical view. 3. Where could I get God's word in 1610? Was it still in committee? Can I use the Bishop's Bible or the Geneva Bible today? The term authorized, in the authorized version as the KJV is sometimes called, means authorized by King James, not authorized by God. From my earlier notes, I would show how some passages in the critical text and other English translations actually support the deity of Christ when the KJV does not. Okay. 6. We know from the Old Testament there was a time when the people did not have access to God's word. It was not used for quite some time and sequentially hidden in the temple precincts until rediscovered in Josiah's time. If God allowed this in the past, why should we demand a preserved word from God today? I believe God's word is preserved, but I disagree with Ruckman as to where it is preserved. This view does not understand the nature of translation. The preface to the KJV written by the translator expresses a view contrary to this view. So those are the points that he's making against that. He says, it is hard to make headway in discussions with this final camp at the KJV moment, but we want to keep this movement, but we want to keep this, keep those in this camp from influencing others, especially lay people in our churches. Translation philosophy. Translation philosophy is part of the discussion that needs to take place when discussing translation. Translators around the world wrestle with the issues package by package as they try to help a group of people with a target language. But there is no cookie cutter approach to translations. At this point, I would like to look at a couple of sections of my paper entitled Gender Neutral Translations in order to discuss this matter. Paraphrase, functional equivalence, and formal equivalence. Wrap up, issues of translation, inspiration, and preservation. Does God ever inspire translations? Who must have access to God's word so that we can say that God's word is preserved? In what language or languages does God's word have to exist so that we can say that God's word is preserved? To what degree are our English copies or any translations in any language inspired and inerrant? Does the Bible predict inspired translations? Does the Bible predict the 1611 translation as inspired? We may have asked this before. Is preservation of God's holy word something to be assumed or something to be proved as a matter of history? Okay, so that's dealing with that. Now I'm going to try to find that other article. Yeah, Nick Sayers. Okay, it is you. Hey, Nick. Will is not a Ruckmanite, but all KJV folks are slandered as Ruckmanites by White Word and Co. Okay, no, I'm coming into this trying to be as objective as possible. So if you have something written about a differentiation between Will Kinney, your views, and all of that, but I think arguing for a TR is better than arguing for the English. But I don't know exactly your views either. So forgive me. I'm new to the specifics of this issue. All right. Okay, let me see here. We already looked at that one. All right. Already looked at that one. Okay, the Alexandrian text. I think that's the one we need to look at. Landmark Baptist Theology. Not it. Texture criticism and manual. Yeah. Yeah, let's zoom in on this part here. Some of y'all, this is old hat, but it's just part of my prep to go back through this. All right. Let's focus on the New Testament. Yeah, let's focus on the New Testament text of criticism for right now. We now have 5,800 plus Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, a number larger than what is available for Old Testament manuscripts, and much larger than any other ancient literature, whether it be Homer or the Greek philosophers or the Roman writers, etc. Most of these are fragmentary or partial manuscripts, Gospels only. However, we have some fairly full manuscripts as early as the 4th century, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, and one fragment that is within 30 years of the writing of the Book of Revelation. That is the fragment P52, Ryland's Library, Manchester, UK, which is dated around AD 125. We have nothing comparable to this in Old Testament manuscripts. There's a photo of it. Two main approaches. The critical text, CT or CR. This more than often follows the Alexandrian text type, since the Alexandrian, Zane Hodges called them Egyptian manuscripts, are the earliest by about 1 century. This is the text that has, for all intents and purposes, followed in the tradition of Westcott and Hort. In terms of external evidence, it depends more often on the earliest manuscripts, Aleph and B, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. In terms of internal evidence, there are varying views awaiting the evidence, but adherents sometimes ignore any evidence, external or internal, from the Byzantine, Syrian text type or majority of manuscripts. Okay. The majority text. This approach follows not the earliest manuscripts, but the largest number of manuscripts. There are variations within this position. You have the statistical majority text. I'm gonna look in the comments. Nick, where'd you go? Where's your comments go? What's happening? Did somebody block Nick Sayers? His comments are gone. Wait, I see him. Never mind. Alright. Alright, let me make sure. I was looking to see if he had mentioned those other resources. Alright, okay, gotcha, guys. Alright. Statistical majority text. This approach just counts the manuscript evidence in a mathematical way. The most references to a reading leads to its inclusion into the text. The Robinson Pierpoint edition of the Greek New Testament follows this approach. It is available online for free, I believe. Just do an internet search. The problem with this approach is that a majority might not be a majority. How do we know if 100 of the witnesses are actually copies of just one manuscript? That is why most who hold to the majority text approach do things differently. Okay. TR, Textus Receptus or received text. This collection, so statistical majority, and then you got the TR. So these are both majority text approaches. Okay. The TR, Textus Receptus or received text. This collection of about 15 or so Greek manuscripts was available in the 16th and 17th centuries and is the basis for the Bishop's Bible, Geneva Bible, and the KJV and the later New King James Version. If my memory serves me correctly, This is a very small subset of the Byzantine Syrian manuscripts available to us from the majority collection. Yet some would defend this approach mostly due to tradition. This was more acceptable in earlier times when we did not have the extent of the collection that we have today. But now this is not tenable. So is this your exact position, Nick? Then you got the Hodges Farstead majority text. This edition by Zane Hodges and author Farstead came out in 1982. It is not a statistical majority text approach like Robinson and Pierpoint. It actually contains within some minority readings, as long as those minority readings come from the majority of Byzantine collections. Uh-oh, my Discord's popping off. It rejects two of the criteria of Westcott and Hort. 1, earliest is best, and 2, shortest reading is best. Most other elements of Westcott and Hort are allowed into the process as long as the Byzantine text is considered along with the other manuscripts. It considers there to be some evidence, mostly from church fathers, that the Byzantine readings are equally early to the main manuscripts used in CT. It outright rejects shortest readings as a canon in light of the very nature of scribal habits. That is, scribes were just as likely to leave out words as to add them. Of special interest is Hodges' embracing of the genealogical ideas of Westcott and Hort, as long as the genealogy is being derived from the Byzantine text, where the sheer number of manuscripts actually allows for manuscript relationships through history to be studied. Hodges would also affirm that CT has a problem in knowing how such a large body of manuscripts develop differently in history. How can this be explained historically? I lean toward this model of New Testament textual criticism, although I'm not dogmatic at all in this area of thought. So Dr. Stollard says he leans toward the Hodges and Farstead. In my practice of textual criticism, in my commentary on Revelation, I tend to follow a reasoned eclecticism, more on that later, but with a focus on external evidence more than internal evidence. This puts me usually holding to a Byzantine reading. So he's got this box here where you got the 5,800 New Testament Greek manuscripts. You got the critical text way over here by itself. The critical text based upon earliest manuscripts and minority of manuscripts. And then you got the Byzantine text, the majority right here. And then you got the TR representing a small piece of the Byzantine text. The Texas Recept is 15 or so later manuscripts available in the West. Then he goes into a discussion of text types. Asavako, do you want to be reader? No, you cannot. You were doing documents. All right. Hey, Franco, how come you don't have a wrench? I can't remember if I offered you one. And Nick, here's you a wrench. All right, text types. If I see any others scroll through that don't have wrenches that I think will want one, I'll give them a wrench. Yeah, I got a Mark Ward stuff as well. I don't have it a lot. FA, I don't know why you don't have a wrench. I can't remember if I offered you one. If you don't want it, just give it back. What in the world is this weird name that's talking about numerical values and all this? Whose channel is that? $ Connie. Well, you got a wrench, so I must have knew you by another name. I don't know. Forgive me. Yeah, yeah, I just gave you a rant for Franco. All right. Text types. The idea of text types refers to the fact that the manuscript evidence can be bundled according to similarities of the manuscripts. In short, there are families of manuscripts that share intrinsic qualities in the reading. Some scholars, like Wilbur Pickering, have rejected the very idea of text types, but the overwhelming majority have affirmed it. Alexandrian. These are texts that tend to follow shorter readings than the earlier, perhaps due to climate perpetuating their existence. Again, Hodges often refers to this text type as the Egyptian text type. The text type is largely the basis of the critical text of today and most modern translations. The Byzantine or Syrian. This text type includes manuscripts that generally have longer readings and which constitute the overwhelming bulk of manuscript evidence that we have. Its manuscripts are usually later, although some go back to within the century of the Alexandrian text type. Some church fathers also use this text type in their quotes, so it cannot be called an extremely late model in all particulars. The texts of this type tend to come from Asia Minor and Europe, where the Apostle Paul's missionary journeys led to great results of the Christian faith. Western. The text type includes manuscripts that have survived from the West, mostly Italy and Northern Africa toward the West. Not all parts of the Bible are included in this text type. For example, there's no discernible Western text type for the book of Revelation. Some scholars early in the day of West Eleanor posited the Caesarean text type, which covered some of the Levant, including Palestine. This was viewed as separate from the development idea of the Alexandrian or Byzantine text type, but over time scholars generally subsumed it under other categories. Some believe that it originated in Europe, but Origen died in 254, took it to Caesarea, I assume maritime here, in Palestine. Some of the manuscripts, however, assigned to this text type appear to be later in time. This text type, according to sources, only appears in the Gospel. The presence of multiple text types among the manuscripts does not increase the divergence among the manuscripts. Remember, the New Testament has a remarkable 95% or so agreement, a rather high mark among ancient manuscripts. This is especially remarkable with so many manuscripts available. One thing that the presence of multiple text types has done is to allow textual critics to consider geographical distribution of the evidence for any given reading. So, for example, if an individual variant is attested by manuscripts from the Alexandrian, Byzantine, and Western text type, often this is strong evidence to prefer that reading. This was the main focus for Dr. Harold Honer in my DTS class on Romans and Galatians. I found it remarkable, though, that most of the time when you follow geographical distribution, you end up with the Byzantine reading. That is, the Western text often sided with the Byzantine text over against the Alexandrian text. Two largest textual issues in the Greek New Testament. Okay. We're working on it. She's actually doing documents right now for something that's called DFA, and that's for registration of marriage in Hong Kong and other things like that. Not Hong Kong, in the Philippines. We got married in Hong Kong, but because of COVID and all that type of stuff, we weren't able to register a marriage, and it's been a long process on her end as well as mine, but please keep it in prayer. Two largest textual issues in the Greek New Testament. John 7, 53, 8 and 11. The woman caught in adultery. This particular reading is absent in the earliest manuscripts. The story in some manuscripts occur in other places in John, e.g. after John 7:36 or after John 12:25. Some manuscripts also have the story in Luke after Luke 21:38 or 24:53. If you hold to the Alexandrian text type, you will not preach it as scripture. If you hold to the majority text, you will proclaim it as scripture. Why do most of the modern translations place it in brackets? Well, that's, a lot of people in my seminary, they're majority text. So why do most of the modern translations place it in brackets? Why not simply put a footnote about it, but leave it out? Is it just tradition? Perhaps. But it could also be the story has an element of historical truth to it, as evidenced by its use in different formats. So even if it's not inspired scripture, it could still be historically accurate, depicting an event in the life of Christ. The ending of Mark 16. Most modern translations put brackets around 16, 9, and 20. The longer ending is considered inauthentic since it does not appear in most of the earliest manuscripts. The view that verse 8 is the end of Mark is thought by those who like the long ending to make the ending abrupt and somewhat inadequate. The fact that the long ending allegedly refers to tongues, snake handling, and drinking poison has turned off some to the long ending. Two other variants exist besides these two main versions. Essentially, a verse is added of Jesus sending out the 12 of the disciples to preach. This is added to verse 8 or to verse 20. So we have four variants on the ending of Mark. The last two are considered less important. Revelation, an example from my commentary. So this is from Dr. Stollard's commentary. I thought I would share with you a section of textual criticism in my commentary on the book of Revelation, which I'm writing. Oh crap, it says not to be shared with others, so I'm not going to share it. Attacks on the critical text due to theological concerns. Okay, we can do with this part. Attacks on the critical text over the blood of Christ, Colossians 1:14 response. There are over 30 references to the blood of Christ for redemption in the critical text. On the whole, the critical text supports the shedding of Christ's blood for redemption. The issue in Colossians 1:14 is the reading in this text, not the overall theology of the blood of Christ. Attacks on the critical text over the deity of Christ, John 1:18. Sometimes I hear it said that CT goes against the deity of Christ, Romans 9:5. The critical text, note the NIV translation in particular, has meaning which includes the deity of Christ, while the KJV TR has only a doxology and Jesus is not called God. Does this mean the TR goes against the deity of Christ? John 1:18. The CT critical text refers to Jesus as the only begotten God, while the TR says that Jesus is the only begotten Son. Does this mean the TR goes against the deity of Christ? Attacks on the critical text over inerrancy of the Bible. Wilbur Pickering argued, based upon around 8 or so examples in the critical text, that the critical text ends up denying the inerrancy of the Bible. That is, it was impossible to maintain inerrancy if you follow the critical text. I studied his example and rejected his analysis. I consider this a false issue, even though I do not favor the critical text on the whole. Some final questions. Have we lost part of the Bible, or do we have 105% of the Bible? Does preservation of the Bible via manuscripts need to be assumed as a presupposition, as Pickering, or proven in textual critical work, as Hodges? Okay. So there's that one. Let me stop sharing my screen. There's another one that's related to this. I guess let's go into this Alexandrian thing. I mean, you can find it online, but I'm going to actually share the actual paper. Chapter 2, the controversy over the Alexandrian text. Modern acceptance of the Alexandrian text type. Westcott or Hort, text and theory. I think this is Stollard. Yeah, it's Stollard. Alright. Westcott Hort, text and theory. The acceptance of the Alexandrian text type of modern textual critics began with the establishment of the theory of B.F. Westcott and F.J.A. Hort and the publishing of their text of the Greek New Testament in 1881. This publication was not the result of totally original work, but leaned heavily upon the previous scholarship of such men as Lockman, Tischendorf, Tregelles, and Afford. The theory has been recounted in many ways and in several places, so the following description of the view of Westcott and Hort is designed to be only a summary and to note the connection of their theory to the acceptance of the Alexandrian text type. Westcott and Hort certainly did not explicitly state that their work was an attempt to establish the Alexandrian text type as defined in the previous chapter. They spoke of a neutral text composed of Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. Both of these manuscripts are dated in the 4th century, making them the oldest unsealed manuscripts available, capital letters. In addition, recognition of the Alexandrian text type, a Western text type, and Assyrian Byzantine text type were voiced. The neutral text was thought to be the closest to the original autographs, while the Syrian text type, which was witnessed to by the majority of the extant manuscripts, was the most removed. Essentially, the oldest manuscripts were deemed best. A more detailed discussion of their conclusions will be given later. The methods behind the conclusion of Westcott and Hort involve several broad principles and even some assumptions. There is no doubt, however, that Hort believed that he was looking at all the evidence and that he had devised a step-by-step approach incorporating all facets of textual criticism. Every method of textual criticism corresponds to some one class of textual facts. The best criticism is that which takes account of every class of textual facts and assigns to each method its proper use and rank. Just what were the constituent elements of Hort's approach? First, the theory begins with individual readings rather than with the nature of the witnesses to the readings. And I can agree with that. I like taking things on an individual basis. Westcott and Hort called this the internal evidence of readings. Under this heading, the critic starts with an attempt to discover which readings make the best sense. This concept is termed intrinsic probability. More important, however, is the attempt to determine the transcriptional probability. That is the reading which can best account for the other readings as the desired reading. Yeah, which one gave the rise to the other readings. Of the importance of this element in Hort's thinking, there can be no doubt. The value of the evidence obtained for transcriptional probability is incontestable. Without its aid, textual criticism could rarely attain any high degree of security. The guide for discerning the original reading via this rule is to look for the harder reading. Such thought forms are the cornerstones of the Greek text rendered by Westcott and Hort. It is especially necessary to bear this limitation in mind where reference to one of the most comprehensive and also most widely prevalent mental impulses of transcribers, the disposition to smooth away difficulties, which is the foundation of the paradoxical precept to choose the harder reading, the more famous of all canons of criticism. The second step for Westcott and Hort was to understand the internal evidence of documents. A particular reading must be understood in light of the characteristics of the entire document in which it resides. The critic can make a better textual decision if he's familiar with the patterns. That makes sense. If any, that result from decisions made on readings throughout the manuscript under consideration. If the readings throughout the document are consistently rejected or accepted on the basis of step 1 above, then the apparent nature of the document as a whole lends greater confidence to the choices made by means of internal evidence of readings. The next, and perhaps most important element in Hort's methodology was the stated attempt to reconstruct genealogies of manuscripts. This necessarily involves the grouping of manuscripts together into families or text types. Supposedly using this approach, the 4 text types, neutral, Alexandrian, Western, Syrian, could be identified and the transmissional history of the New Testament were clearly presented. Applying these steps to textual questions, Hort arrived at some rather sweeping conclusions. First, the Syrian text was relegated to inferiority when compared to other text types. Several specific details led to such a declaration. Hort produced a handful of example readings from the Syrian text, which demonstrated a combination of readings from other text types. Hort surmised that this conflation of readings indicated later origin for the Syrian text type. He also observed that the earliest church father to use the Syrian text consistently was Chrysostom, who died in the early 5th century. Internal evidence yielded a similar result, since the Syrian text was apparently characterized by smoothness and clarity. Since the harder reading is to be preferred in most cases, the Syrian text type was thought to be faulty when variance among manuscripts was found. As a result of this rejection of the Syrian text type, Hort was forced to explain how the Syrian text type came into being, especially since the vast majority of extant manuscripts are of this type. He posited the view that an editorial recension took place, probably centered at Antioch around the 4th century, in an effort to produce an authoritative text. A second conclusion was the acceptance of the neutral text, the Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, as the most reliable text type. If these two manuscripts were in agreement, the belief was that the reading found there were probably closest to the original, even if the other text types testified against it. Following the gradual narrowing of groups, we come first to the combination of Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, which is, as we have intimated, wherever it occurs, the constant element of those variable groups that are found to have habitually the best readings. The statement remains true, we believe, not less when the groups dwindle, so as to leave the Sinaiticus and Vaticanus comparatively or absolutely alone than when there are larger compass. Other specifics could be given from Hort's ideas, but the purpose of this thesis does not require them. The important point to see is that the Westcott-Hort theory rejected the traditional text, i.e. the Textus Receptus, represented in the Syrian text type, or Byzantine. Furthermore, the acceptance of Sinaiticus and Vaticanus indicates a preference for what this thesis terms the Alexandrian text type. Although Westcott and Hort separated their neutral text from their Alexandrian text type, sequences scholarship has generally recognized that the distinction is unwarranted. Therefore, Westcott and Hort's work can safely be seen to be a general acceptance of the Alexandrian text type, with Sinaiticus and Vaticanus as its key witnesses, as the most reliable testimony to the actual New Testament text. A brief evaluation of the Westcott-Hort theory. The Westcott-Hort theory apparently had enough good qualities to make it attractive to a large number of scholars. First of all, the theory was couched in positive terms as well as negative elements. A great deal of space is given to establish reasons for accepting the neutral text, not just a negative rejection of the Syrian text. Hort not only rejected the Textus Receptus, but offered a text type in its place. A second positive thrust is that the attention was given to methodology. Hort's method encompassed a rather broad spectrum of ideas. Internal evidence as well as external evidence had its place. All text types, as Hort saw them, were discussed. In fact, one could say that the theory had more breadth than depth. Such a focus caused one to concentrate on the principles of methodology rather than the details of application. Certainly both are needed, but Hort's strong suit was the former. A third contribution of the Westcott-Hort theory comes as a result of this broadness. The view was wide enough to form a baseline for future work in textual criticism. This idea will be expanded further in the next section, where the viewpoint that modern scholarship had not deviated from Westcott and Hort in either text or theory will be put forward. Whether one likes this turn of events or not, a reference point for textual studies is needed. Westcott and Hort provided one. In spite of these positive yet general qualities, the theory bogs down when specifics are scrutinized. First of all, the tenet that the oldest manuscripts are best falls into question on two counts. To begin with, Hort's method may have been derived from his goal rather than from inductive study of the issues. After studying some of the personal correspondence of Hort as he began work on the version of the Great New Testament, Pickering comes to the following conclusion: that it actually took 28 years does not obscure the circumstance that, though uninformed by his own admission, Hort conceived a personal animosity for the Textus Receptus, and only because it was based entirely, as he thought, on late manuscripts. It appears Hort did not arrive at his theory through unprejudiced intercourse with the facts. Rather, he deliberately set out to construct a theory that would vindicate his preconceived animosity from the received text. Caldwell joins Pickering in this biting criticism. Westcott and Hort wrote with two things constantly in mind: the Textus Receptus and the Codex Vaticanus. But they did not hold them in mind with the passive objectivity which romanticists ascribe to the scientific mind. In addition, on this issue, Hort ignores the possibility that the latter manuscripts may be derived from copies that go back to an earlier time, even as early as Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. His unfounded confidence on this point may result from the weaknesses discussed next. The second complaint that could be leveled at the theory is indeed a serious one. The view at times shows a great lack of empirical analysis. Hort took only a few examples and derived generalizations of a large scope from them. For example, only 8 complete readings were given to pass judgment on an entire text type, as Caldwell points out. No text or document is homogeneous enough to justify judgment on the basis of part of its readings for the rest of its readings. This was Hort's Achilles heel. He is saying here that since these 8 complete readings occur in the Syrian text, that text as a whole is a mixed text. If a manuscript or text lacks these readings, it is in other readings a witness to a text antecedent to mixture. One gets a feeling that Hort's presentation had an error of scientific methods, whereas in substance his efforts show little background work of an empirical nature. Another assumption is evident in Hort's theory, this one concerning history. To account for the existence of the later Syrian texts, Hort had conjectured that an editorial recension had taken place sometime in the 4th century. Such was a useful tool for Hort, but not one single item of evidence from original sources can be produced to substantiate the claim. It is merely an assumption. Finally, Westcott and Hort are to be criticized for a less than definitive way of establishing a text type. This can be demonstrated in one case clearly. The so-called neutral text, rather than being a clear demonstration of one text type, has over 3,000 variant readings in the Gospels when the two witnesses, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, are compared. Such a claim takes on an added meaning when it is the combination of Sinaiticus and Vaticanus which comprise the best text for Hort. Acceptance of the Alexandrian text since Westcott and Hort. Despite some extremely serious faults with the Westcott-Hort theory, modern scholarship has followed closely behind. To their credit, scholars have not followed blindly but have modified Hort's view to some extent. However, the purpose of this section is to show that since 1881, the amount of modification has been minimal with respect to theory and also related to the text itself. In this sense, much of the modern textual scholarship would be seen as accepting, for the most part, the Alexandrian text type as opposed to the Syrian or Byzantine text. As to theory, the scene of textual criticism since Westcott and Hort can be summed up into one word: eclecticism. Eclecticism is one of those unfortunate words that means different things to different people. However, two types of eclecticism seem prominent. First, there's the more general type. Thank you, pseudonym. Thanks for the blessing. Can't wait for this debate. We will say, do you speak English or fluent in Greek and Hebrew? He might win because it's inconclusive. Can't wait. Good stuff. Hey, tokenomics. All right. Let's see. However, two types of eclecticism seem prominent. Early on, I read stuff on textual criticism, Gordon Fee's New Testament Exegesis. That was some of my exposure. The New Testament Hermeneutic book by Exegesis by Bach and Fanning. That was early exposure to it. David Allen Bach's book on textual criticism was exposure. Wagner on the Old Testament, as well as Old Testament exegesis. What was that guy's name? Can't remember his name right now. But those were my influences on textual criticism. And then I've read a lot of different other people since then. But I've just never have had to make a decision on, do I accept a particular text type or any of that. I don't want to rule out any information. But may have to come down to it. But anyway, however, two types of eclecticism seem prominent. First, there's the more general type, which attempts to make textual judgments after weighing all the facts, both internal and external. More attention is, however, given to internal considerations for a given reading. He refers to this as a reason eclecticism. I think that was the term that David Allen Black used. But also there's the Sturgeon form of textual criticism or method. One second, I'll show y'all some. This one, The Byzantine Text Type and New Testament Textual Criticism by Sturtz. I got these in Logos, but this is another one that early on, this has to do with textual criticism as well, Bach and Fanning. I've used this at a couple seminaries. Of course, I have these updated. I have the updated version in Logos, but that's the fee. This is a book to help you understand fee. It deals with textual criticism. I read these probably 2007. Give me a second, guys. Another one on textual criticism, Introduction New Testament by Greenlee. That was one of my seminary books. For Hebrew, I got this in updated edition. I read the Greek one and the Hebrew one around the same time. Thanks, Pseudonym. These are my Hebrew grammars. Let's see what else. I got some more, but I can't see them on first glance. But those are some of the main ones. What are you asking about, Millennium Envoy? Pseudonym is saying, I like KJV because NSV says, NIV says. Okay. Whoa, you're right. It's gone on my end too. What's gone? What are y'all talking about, guys? Y'all got to catch me up. Oh, praise I am? Oh, well, it's been gone before and it came back. So, you never know. He just may be in trouble for right now. So, but yeah, I got stuff on Rumble. But I don't know why the streaming to Rumble while you're multi-streaming is too hard. Because I think you gotta put the link in every single time. And I just don't have that going for me. But I had to get the premium for Twitter to broadcast over that as well. So, okay. So where am I at now? All right. So guys, it's not like I've been studying this stuff for years, but I haven't made a decision. There's a lot of things that debating has caused me to have to make decisions on to really decide on certain things, at least to rule certain things out. I'm not there yet in this field. You know, this is a particular area that, you know, the other thing is that in seminary we had to, I can't remember the Munchausen site or whatever, not Munchausen, the Munster site as it's called. We had to categorize manuscripts. We would have to read the unseals and then identify that. That was for an exegetical methods class, so that was kind of cool. So I had a little bit of experience with that, but nothing to write home about. You know, just it's a challenging topic. But anyway, Fee refers to this as reason eclecticism. Oh, let me show y'all the David Allen Black book. I think I have it in Logos. And I think he's actually written a more recent one. I don't remember if I got that one. Let's see. He's in the perspectives on the ending of Mark. Yeah, this is the one that I read. I probably read this one around 2010. This one right here, New Testament Text for Criticism, A Concise Guide. And that one came out in 1994. I like David Black. Let's see. Okay. I think he has a new one out. David Allen Black, Textual Criticism. This is Dwayne Green. He interviewed him. What is the Sturzian method in New Testament textual criticism? But there's another book. Oh, this one. I don't think this is in Logos. Rethinking New Testament textual criticism. Well, it's like, okay, I've read your books in the past, but I'm kind of interested. It's like, okay, what are you doing differently now? You know, let's see if it's in Logos. Doesn't look like it. So anyway, that one is going to be on my list. Google Books. He wrote that in 2002. But yeah, that'll be one that's on my books. But let's get back to reading. Fee refers to this as reason eclecticism. Such an approach is not far from what Westcott and Hort were attempting to do. In fact, modern eclecticism of this sort can be viewed as the outgrowth of the Westcott-Hort theory. Okay. A second type of eclecticism is termed by Gordon Fee as rigorous eclecticism. I think these are the terms that he uses in the New Testament exegesis book. We'll check later. This method is characterized by a total reliance upon internal evidence for a reading without regard for any external evidence such as date, text type, etc. The method isolates and emphasizes the intrinsic and transcriptional probabilities that form a part of Hort's overall scheme. G.D. Kirkpatrick, is one of the leading proponents of this approach. His conclusions sometimes lead him to accept Byzantine or Syrian readings, unlike Hort's conclusion. Likewise, J.K. Elliott fits into this camp, which appears to have more differences with Westcott and Hort than reason eclecticism. For example, Elliott explains this view. Let's see who's all in the Four Views book, their names. And James Snap is actually mentioned in that book, I think in footnotes or something. I saw that last night. But so David Allen Black's in there, Darrell Bach, Elliot Keith, I think that's the one you just mentioned. Maurice Robertson and Wallace are mentioned in there. For example, Elliot explains this view in relation to finding the history for the text. It is, however, not the kind of history or documents which tries to explain the rise of alleged major recensions. Man, I'm having trouble. Nor is it an attempt to trace the genealogical pedigree of manuscripts. Rather, it tends to be a history of text or variation, which is a different thing altogether. Nonetheless, both types of eclecticism have their roots in the theory of Westcott and Hort. In fact, many scholars are lamenting the fact that not much progress in theory has been made. Epp, that's Theodore. No, not Theodore Epp. Who is this Epp guy? James Epp? I can't remember his first name. We simply do not know how to make a definitive determination as to what the best text is. We do not have a clear picture of the transmission and alteration of the text in the first few centuries. The Westcott-Hort kind of text has maintained its dominant position largely by default. Ian Moore complains that a rescue operation is necessary to shake the stagnation in the area of textual criticism. And now they do it through, I can't remember what it's called, wherever you basically put everything in the computer, and I'd have to go to Wallace's site to see the name of it. I can't remember. Clark summarizes, since the appearance of Westcott-Hort, nothing but eclectic revision has been introduced into any critical edition. Insofar as the original effort continues for the reconstruction of the original text, the method employed has been eclectic exclusively. With respect to the method, F asks the following capsule question. With all our New Testament materials and the many valuable research tools produced in the 20th century, where is the methodological advance in our critical texts still approximates? That of the late 19th century, or if we still cannot clearly trace its early history. Thus, current textual theory has modified Hort's ideas only slightly in the eyes of many scholars. Epp's question above leads also into the discussion about the Greek text that have appeared since Hort's time. The vast majority of those texts are basically the same as the text of the Westcott Hort. Hep charges that none of the currently popular hand editions of the Greek New Testament take us beyond Westcott Hort in any substantive way. Empirical analysis has been performed to support this conclusion. The propagation of the critical text has been brought about mainly through the several editions of the Nestle-Allen text and the text of the UBS Society. Yeah, NA28, I think is what they're on, and UBS 5. Eliot, in his analysis of the former text, notes the following. The readers of the NA at the time, I guess it was 26, would note that Westcott and Hort's practice with the so-called Western non-interpolations has been disregarded, and this has made a particular difference in NA 26 as Luke 24. The resultant text elsewhere is, however, still close to Hort. The editor complains that it has been referred to ironically as Westcott and Hort Redivivis. One suspects that those who have so described the text may have done so precisely because one of the editors responsible for the text, Professor Matthew Black, stated without any apparent irony that the UBS text, which eventually became identical with NA 26, does not mark a revolutionary departure, but is substantially a Westcott and Hort type of text. In another article, Eliot complains that the UBS text tends to cling closely to Westcott and Hort's favorites. Therefore, one can easily see that in both theory and text, most scholarship has stayed close to the work of 1881. Now, what significance does this have for the present thesis? Much in every way. If the critical texts of today are not far removed from the text of Hort, and if the Westcott-Hort theory has only been slightly adjusted, then one can conclude that the modern scholarship since 1881 has consciously or not generally accepted the Alexandrian text type as the most reliable testimony to the original autographs of the New Testament. Modern rejection of the Alexandrian text type. In the days of Westcott and Hort, not all scholars readily received their views. A serious objection was raised by those who wanted to do more than adjust what Westcott and Hort had done. Led by a scholar named John William Burgon, a course was raised and insisted upon the total rejection of the Westcott-Hort theory. The Alexandrian witnesses, including the neutral text, were not accepted and the Byzantine text was retained. The level of rejection here was with text types, not simply with various readings as the discussion below will show. The theory of John William Burgon. Burgon held tenaciously to what he termed the traditional text. Essentially, this meant that he accepted the Syrian text type as being closest to the original. What's another term for Byzantine? Is it magisterial text? There's another term that kind of reflects ecclesiology. I can't remember the name of it. Other names for the Byzantine text type. I think it's related to confessional. It isn't the majority. Yeah, the ecclesiastical text. Yeah, these are different names. I've met Reformed people that go by this. And they receive it by confession. Okay. The theory of John Burgon. Burgon held tenaciously to what he termed the traditional text. Essentially, this meant that he accepted the Syrian text type as being closest to the original. He did not believe that all readings of the Syrian text were to be retained. Edward Miller conclusively remarks the following. First, be it understood that we do not advocate perfection in the Textus Receptus. We allow the here and there it requires revision. In the text left behind by Dean Burgon, about 150 corrections have been suggested by him in St. Matthew's Gospel alone. What we maintain is the traditional text, and we trace it back to the earliest ages of which there is any record. Thus, Bergen felt the book of external evidence, the Assyrian text, should be followed. Bergen's major contribution was to properly question some of the assumptions and conclusions of Hort. In a chapter entitled The 7 Notes of Truth, he sets forth the core of his complaints. These can be summarized as below. First, corruptions to the manuscripts came about, for the most part, before the oldest available manuscripts. Therefore, the most ancient testimony, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus at that time, may not be the best testimony to the original. Second, corruptions came about before. Second, the number of manuscripts for any particular variant should be taken into account as part of the weighing of the witnesses. We don't count manuscripts, we weigh them. This view leads away from accepting the Alexandrian text, since it is usually in the minority. Third, the variety of characteristics of the many manuscripts supporting a certain reading point to its genuineness. Fourth, the history of any existing manuscript is not fully known, and the respectability of any particular manuscript is subjective. Fifth, the absence of continuous witness over time with regard to a particular reading should cause one to doubt its authority. This principle spreads suspicion over the Alexandrian text, since it's not well attested in the later centuries of manuscript history. Sixth, the contextual setting should be taken into account when examining a variant. Here, Bergen and Westcott and Hort agree. However, they apparently disagree on much exegesis. Bergen's exegesis favors the traditional text, while theirs moves toward the Alexandrian text. Seventh, internal evidence has some force in variant consideration, but should only be subsidiary in nature compared to external evidence. These principles are basically the same as the ones held by present-day supporters of the majority text. Therefore, a brief evaluation of these beliefs will be reserved for a later section. The majority text view today. "100 years after Bergen, a small shift in textual criticism has taken place. Although the critical text still dominates in much the same way the Textus Receptus did in the past, a slight movement is being made in the direction of the text type with the bulk of external evidence, namely the Byzantine." Well, while we're doing this, I need to look up what that's called. I can't remember the term. Textual criticism methods. Can't remember what it's called. CJEM. Oh, cool. All this is free now. Yeah, I've done this before. I can't remember. It's an abbreviation. Don't let your Greek die. It's about collation. Collating the manuscript. I can't remember. I can't believe let me try that in. Collation. Let me take out Wallace's name. And maybe I get it down. Okay. Collation in various texts is referred to as a Valerium. Well, that's related, but they're doing it through computers now. Let's see. I'm looking in the comments, see if any of y'all mention what it's called. Oh my goodness. Collating. Yeah, but what's the name? The abbreviation? Let's see. Application to religious documents. Software. Okay, all right. Critical editions. My goodness, it should not be this hard. CGM, I think is what it's called. The newer method of New Testament. Yeah, CBG. I'm not going to play this. I'm just going to get the name. Coherence-based genealogical method. See, whenever this article that we're reading was written, it does not interact with this. Okay. Yeah, this is the site, the Munster. I think this is the site where I had to fill things in, categorize stuff. Evangelical. Here, this is CGBM in one sentence. We'll come back to this in the future if we need it, but all right. So here's my one sentence description. The CBGM is a new set of computer-based tools for studying a new set of texts, critical evidence based on a new principle for relating texts. So it's talking about how the texts are related. For studying a new set of critical evidence, new set of computer-based tools. But anyway, so just keep that in mind as we're looking at the information we're looking at. This is the one that a lot of people are talking about. And there's debate around it. Of course, right? But here we are dealing with the majority thing. The majority text view today. 100 years after Bergen, a small shift in textual criticism taking place. Although the critical text still dominates in much the same way the textual receptive did in the past, a slight movement is being made in the direction of the text type with the bulk of external evidence, namely the Byzantine. Since the majority of manuscript evidence is classified in this group, the term majority text has been adopted to signify this rather large group of external witnesses. This view appears to be getting a greater hearing in scholarly discussion. Gordon Fee himself, not in favor of the majority text, has written a recent article on the revival of the Textus Receptus. Pickering's book supporting the view has already been referenced earlier. Van Bruggen refers to the numerical support in a positive way. The large number deserves attention, since in the midst of all sorts of variation, it confronts us with the growing uniformity. This can hardly be described historically as spontaneous, convergent deviation. It later points in the direction of the simultaneous, turning back in the various centers to the same central point of the original text. This text was sought in the oldest and most faithful manuscripts, and people conformed to it after centuries of textual disintegration. The majority text position, however, must not be thought as a neatly organized package that all proponents agree on. Certainly, the crudest form of the view would be to conduct a majority vote of all manuscripts and exclude all internal evidence as a factor. Bergen did not necessarily do this, and there are those proponents today who do not do it either. Let's see how the poll's going. Okay. The most comprehensive presentation as to the method of arriving at a version of the majority text is the recent publication of the Greek New Testament according to the majority text, edited by Zane Hodges and Arthur Farstead. In the introduction, the editor's note 2 principles on which your method is based. First, any reading with the overwhelming... I need some water. Right, revolution. I couldn't remember the term. I knew that the term ecclesiastical is some that confessional people like using. All right. Let's see, where are we at? In the introduction, the editors note 2 principles on which their method is based. First, any reading with an overwhelming majority of support is probably the original reading. The statement is derived from the following premise. In any tradition where there are not major disruption in the transmissional history, the individual reading which has the earliest beginning is the one most likely to preserve in a majority of documents. Second, a reading should be accepted on the basis of a reconstruction of genealogical tree for each book of the Bible. Thus, Hodges applies the genealogical method employed, as he says, poorly by Westcott and Hort. He explains his confidence in this method. In fact, the major impediment to this method in modern criticism has been the failure to recognize the claims of the majority text. Any text form with exceedingly large numbers of extant representatives is very likely to be the result of a long transmissional chain. All genealogical reconstruction should take this factor into account. A persistent preference for a small minority of text cannot be surrendered, then naturally genealogical work will prove impossible. Thus, this brand of method, similar to Bergen's approach, rejects the Alexandrian text type and goes with the bulk of external witnesses. A brief evaluation of the majority text. The one strong suit of the majority text approach is that it concentrates on the bulk of an objective evidence that textual critics do have. This view avoids the pitfall of Hort's thinking by including the Byzantine evidence. It is reasonable to assume that 85% of the witnesses to the New Testament can be ignored when there is no historical explanation of their deviation from the minority witnesses. In addition, this approach properly elevates external evidence above internal evidence. Internal evidence has its place, but has less control over fanciful interpretation. However, one major problem remains to be solved for the proponents of this view. Westcott and Hort properly called attention to the fact that an absolute majority may not be truly representative of preceding copies. If out of 10 manuscripts, 9 agree against the one, but the 9 are found to come from the same source or copy, then the resultant battle was 1 against 1 rather than 9 against 1. In other words, if the repository copies from which the Byzantine copies were produced were not uniformly spread out across the textual tradition, then the majority text would lose its majority. Therefore, this view has this assumption just like Hort had his. However, Pickering suggests that enough of the transmissional history can be ascertained to make the former assumption more reasonable. The King James Version movement. Along with the scholarly resurgence of the majority text, is the popular movement emphasizing tradition while not being characterized by strong scholarship. There are many fine people in this group, but one gets the impression that the only reason for their support of the Byzantine text type is that it forms the textual tradition for which the King James Version was translated. There exists an unfriendly element within the movement that deserves attention due to its emphasis on the influence of Alexandria on textual tradition. It vehemently attacks the Alexandrian text type with abiding rhetoric and holds religiously to the text's receptors as divinely provided. One of its major spokesmen offers what he calls the creed of the Alexandrian cult, quoted below in part. This is the one that Zane Hodges didn't have him change. There was a series of writings on one time which, if they had all been put into a book as soon as they were written the first time, would have constituted an infallible and final authority by which to judge truth and error. However, this series of writings was lost, and the God who inspired them was unable to preserve their content through Bible-believing Christians at Antioch. So God chose to almost preserve them through Gnostics and philosophers. For Alexandria, Egypt, emphasis is the authors. And should we say advertisement or advertisement? Either way. I would like to rhyme advertisement. I don't know what the aversion is to people that don't like advertisement. Is it spelled like that or is it advertisement? I don't know, but it's kind of tantalizing. Anyway, keep going. An advertisement in the same publication offers 8 cassette tapes on the Alexandrian cult. This movement disdains the school of Alexandria and is hateful in its presentation against those with whom it disagrees. One must be careful not to associate with literature with the work of such men as Pickering and Hodges. However, such work does point out the need to study the connection between the city of Alexandria and the Alexandrian text type, if any exists. Summary. At a broad level, modern textual scholarship can be divided into 2 camps. The majority of textual critics, beginning with Westcott and North, generally follow a theory in a text that effectively treats a minority of the external evidence as the most reliable, namely the Alexandrian text type. This is even true of the supporters of the eclectic adjustments to Hort's view and of the latest versions of the Greek New Testament, Nessel Allen, UBS, which is veered little from the course that Hort charted. On the other hand, there's the minority of textual critics who hold the Byzantine text type of the majority text as the most accurate testimony to the original autographs, beginning with John Bergen and Hort Stay and continuing today with Hodges. Pickering and others moving in favor of the majority text is slowly growing. This view is accepting the majority text rejects the Alexandrian text type as the primary witness to the actual New Testament text. Notes. All right, so here's the footnotes. We'll just look through here real quick. JF. All right. So we got that done. Let's see what Logos brings up whenever I type in textual criticism. So I'm just going to do a generic search. We can do backwards, or we can do we'll do backwards first. I have 19,000 resources. Hey, pseudonym, thanks for the blessing. Can't wait till you get your doctorate. Well, I don't know if I'll ever get a doctorate, but I'll have a MBS soon, God willing, and a THM shortly after that. All right, so top results, textual criticism of the Bible. Let's see what they brought up here. What resource is this in? Yeah, okay. So, key article, according to them, they're going to say that the Lexham Bible Dictionary. All right. So let's just click on it. Oh, and by the way, guys, I was trying to show y'all this the other day, but now I know how to do it because I came across it. If you download Logos and you say 10 free books, Logos Bible, you'll find this right here. Or, well, dang it, I had to go this route. Here it is, 10 free resources. This is John Piper, but it's kind of like inductive. These are free excerpts from Abraham Kuyper. You get it in a bridge BDB, but this is the one I wanted to tell you about. Lexham Intro Collection. So you'll get the LEB, Lexham English Bible, you get the SBL Greek New Testament, and you'll get the Faith Life Study Bible, and you'll get the Lexham Bible Dictionary. These are free. All you gotta do is download Logos, and then go to this part right here, top 10 free sources, and they're uploaded. And then the Faith Life Study Bible. Ralph West, Weaving the Texture Web Workflow. Never used that one. Joy Project. Take Care How You Listen Sermons by John Piper on Receiving the Word. The Life and Death of King John. Shakespeare, okay. How Should I Live in the World? Crucial Questions. SRC Sproul. So you can get 10 free resources in Logos right there. Okay. So one of them that I'm looking at, you can get access to. Lexham Bible Dictionary from that page right there. So you got recensions of the text, Masoretic, Septuagint, Samaritan Pentateuch. We don't have to go into that. So this is Old Testament. Shape of the biblical text in early periods. Theories about the development of the biblical text. This is all about the Hebrew stuff. Now, I have Brotzmann's book on textual criticism, which we used in seminary. New description. So this is mainly Old Testament I'm looking at right now. I would probably want to read it. Then it gives you a bibliography, related articles, and a bibliography stuff you could go study. So now it goes into an article about textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible. What we just read, we were just skimming. That's Emmanuel Toe. He does a lot of work with the Septuagint. Textual criticism of the Hebrew Bible methodology. So it goes through all that. There we go. Textual criticism. That was also by Emmanuel Toe. New Testament. Transmission of the New Testament text. Alexandrian text, talking about here. It's given to textual families. Byzantine. Problems in New Testament textual criticism materials. Greek manuscripts. It tells you about the papyries, the magistrals or uncials, minuscules, lectionaries. Divides those up. Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus, discussion of them. Church Fathers. Wait, that's okay. Metzger. I have never read that book. I don't even know if I got that one. Gives a summary. Methods. Here's the different methods. And so this, I don't know where each individual article is written at, but this is 2016. Yeah, 2016. So it's a little bit more recent, of course. I don't know if it'll have the computer method thing in here. I'll do a search for that in a minute. Okay, look at this. It's got a good chart showing the different views. More focus on the internal evidence is rigorous eclecticism, internal priority, and it gives the proponents for each one. Then you got internal and external, reason eclecticism. I think I lean to this, or I have in times past. Roughly equals emphasis on internal, fee, most textual critics. And then more external would be the majority text view, external, Zane Hodges, Robinson, and only conservatives hold to this view. So it goes through talking about the different views, reason, application, New Testament, criticism, the principles for canonicity, not canonicity, for textual criticism. Gives some examples, external evidence, inclusions, related articles, bibliography. See, it's quoting David Allen Black right there. All right. So that's good. So it's showing me all my dictionaries. I have tons of them. The Stanley Porter one on textual criticism. Lots of stuff. And journal articles on it. New test. Lots of here's a recent textual criticism. But what I want to do is I've already searched for Will Kinney's name, and if I remember right, nothing came up. So he, out of my 19,000 books, and so you know I'm not exaggerating, you'll see the number 19,902, and Will Kinney doesn't show up. Okay. Well, he does one. There is a Christianity Today that mentions his name, but I don't know if it's the same person. But what I want to do is I want to go back to that. What was it called? CGM Textual Criticism. It's CGBTM, I think. CGBTM. CBGMN1. All right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna search my library for coherence-based genealogical method. Come back. Where is it? I'll just get it from right here. I don't want you to read it. I want to paste it. Coherence-based genealogical method. Okay, so now let's run this through our search. And let's do books. All books. Well, we'll do all, which means that it'll search across even stuff I don't own. Hey, MMA Paradise. All right. Yeah, it's in the plumber book. Okay. So I think I have this one. No, not in this one. 40 questions about the text and canon of the New Testament. Well, let's get it. Let me stop sharing my screen real quick. Whenever I took hermeneutics, we used Plummer's book. This is in that same series. 1 second, guys. Last time I shared my credit card and I had to go back and blot it out. So on my PayPal, it's not credit card. All right. All right. Did it download? I think it did. 2 updated books. Well, the good thing is I just need $11 to pay, and I'll own my Schaefer Seminary Logos package. That's one thing that's cool about Schaefer is you pay about 100. I mean, seminary classes are cheap, about 400 a class if you're doing the program, and then there's $100 for that you put on your Logos a semester, and then once you reach $800, that Logos package is yours. So if you could see my landing page, hey, what happened? Usually you'll see it advertised up here, but I think I can show y'all like this. Schaefer Seminary Logos package. That's a journal. Let me check here. Let's see. Students, academic program. And it's probably in EdBright. Logos. Seminary Schaefer student does not offer technical support for the Logos package. You have to contact them there. If you have purchased the Logos package through Schaefer Seminary, find license subscription information in the Schaefer Logos library course in EdBright. Yeah. So but yeah, you get a package. A lot of seminaries do that, but even whenever the other seminaries do that, the tuition is way more. So anyway, I'm sorry I got distracted. Okay, so we got to go back to our search on text or criticism. I can't index, but I think I'll be all right. CGBM. This is the discussion. Well, that's just the method. I got that part. Go back to search. Okay. 4 questions. CBGM. I'm just going to type that in to see if I can get it. CGBM. What? Why aren't you working? I guess I need to look at the table of contents. All right. So part 1, the text of the New Testament. Section A, transmission. Section B, New Testament manuscript. Section C, textual criticism. What are the major groups of manuscripts? Why not just follow the Greek text behind the King James Version? Why not just follow the reading preserved in the majority of manuscripts? How do most scholars decide between readings of different manuscripts? Yeah, this would be a good book. The practice of textual criticism. The canon of the new... we don't need the canon part. So, this one just came out. Yeah, 2023. So this is a good one. I'm probably going to be diving into it. Don Wilkins. What is this? The text of the New Testament, science and art of textual criticism. Okay. So right now we're searching stuff that's not just in my Logos. We're searching across Logos Bible software. Stuff I own, stuff I don't own. A critical examination of... Alright, so Tyndale did an examination. Let's see if I got that one. Yeah, and that's Peter Gurry. That was that website we were looking at a while ago. A critical examination of the coherence-based genealogical method in the Catholic epistles. Well, it's just limited to the Catholic epistles. And Catholic doesn't mean like the Roman Catholic. It means the epistles that were written, you know, to a general audience. Okay. I may look into that one later. Let's see what else we got. Once again, you got the coherence-based genealogical method. Yeah, let's engage this right here. Let's just see. The coherence-based genealogical method. Tommy Wasserman and Peter Gurry defined CGBM as a method that one uses a set of computer tools based in a new way relating manuscript texts, and 3 designed to help us understand the origin and history of the New Testament text. Although Westcott and Hort sometimes referred to the genealogy of texts and documents, the CGBM is focused exclusively on the relationship of texts. A text refers to specific readings that appear in a manuscript rather than artifact itself. A text refers to specific readings rather than... Okay. The basic purpose of the method is to identify the readings of the initial text. This is the reconstructed text, not the text that appears in a single extant manuscript, from which all other extant text is in. Yeah, so this is like from a collation and you're trying to trace it back. I think that's what they do. The first step of the method involves determining how closely texts are related as indicated by their levels of agreement. Okay. See, Logos does this with Bible translations. Like if I pull up, like I'll show y'all. Text comparison. I got Psalms 78:36 up here. So boom. Right now you're seeing all across the English. You can do it in other languages and stuff, but these are different translations of Psalms 78:36. whatever I had it on, right? And you can do interlinear too. But you see this markup thing? Whatever your base text is, right? So I think the first one is mentioned. So the Darby is mentioned first. You'll see it says 30% difference here, 58% difference. And so it's showing you where the different, you pick a base text, like you could do this with King James, and you can find out how they differ. And then there's another thing called Word River. Where's it at? I haven't used this thing in a long time. You could do horizontal, vertical layout, show differences, show base text. River. It's supposed to show a diversion. I don't even remember how to get to it. I'll show it to y'all. So you go to Logos text comparison Word River. Let's see if it still exists. I'm not going to play this, but I'll just show y'all where we're going. Yeah, there's the text comparison stuff. Then there's a Word River. Yeah, that's the mark out idea. You can mark it. It shows when it marks out differentiations. How to compare Bible translations. Let's see if this is it. Text comparison tool. Multiple resources. Okay, here's the pericope. The cluster graph. Differences in Bible translation. I got to remember how to get to this. It's under the passage analysis tool. Okay. Got it. And where the heck is the passage analysis tool? There it is. So right now, what this is showing us is in the NASB, ESV, CB, NIV, and NET. It's showing us the minimum, max, and average. You can compare pericopes, which are the paragraphing, for each one of these translations that I have. Eusebian canons even. You have the word tree. I don't know why the word there is mentioned here. Here's the Morph River I was telling you about. This shows you where the variations occur in the manuscripts. That's paragraphing, I think. Conjunction by conjunction type. Cluster graph, so you can see which for Psalm 78, where each one of them relate to each other. So if you want to see the relationship of the Good News Bible to the authorized standard version, you click here. We want to see the result of the KJV. Oh, I messed up. You click on the KJV. You can see where they line up. And this is the versions of the rivers where they differ. So there's all kinds of ways to visualize the differences in the books and manuscripts. So I can do a lot more translation stuff, textual criticism stuff. I mean, You can do the same thing. Watch this. If I do exegetical guide, I know this is Hebrew, but we'll just use it. So you got textual variants, right? And you'll see I have all the critical apparatuses for like the Septuagint, the Vulgate, and all of that. And then you have the section on additions, and then you have a text comparison. So I'm able to compare, like we're in the Old Testament Hebrew manuscripts. So I click this and it's showing me, just like what we were doing with the English, it can show me the differences in the Hebrew manuscripts or the Hebrew versions of manuscripts. Lexham Hebrew Bible, Biblical Hebraica Stuttgartensia, the differences and things like that. Ancient versions, you can do text comparison. If you wanted to compare the Septuagint, same thing. Here's the Suite and the Logos one. And then you can do the same thing in the Latin for the different Vulgates. So it's all there. I just haven't used it to my full potential, that's for sure. All right. Back to what we were reading. The first step of the method involves determining how closely texts are related as indicated by the levels of agreement. Using the data from the Editio Critical Mayor volumes. They're using the data from this? Well, what is this? Let's see here. Shortened ECM is a critical edition of the Greek New Testament being produced by that German place. Check that out. The AI just did a big summary over it. That's what that is. The AI made a key takeaway, and it can read to me also. But I want to do my own takeaway right now. Methodology. So they're using this research as the basis for what they're doing. The CBGM determines how frequently texts agree out of all the variant units that they both contain. For example, in the Book of Acts, Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus agree on 6,800 out of 7,387 variant units, or in 92% of variant units. This high level agreement indicates a close relationship between the two texts. You see how that's working, guys? They are clearly derived from the same ancestor, probably only a few generations or copies back. So it's sort of like DNA, right? That's sort of like the idea behind it. The level of agreement between two texts is referred to as pre-genealogical coherence. The data is pre-genealogical because it does not show which text is earlier or later in the genealogy text. Right, because there could be missing links, if you will. Identifying missing manuscripts. Identifying a group of relatives is only a first step in constructing a family tree. To complete the genealogy, one must determine how texts are related, i.e. which are parents, which are siblings, which are cousins, etc. Pre-genealogical coherence indicates that the two texts are related and show how closely they're related. It does not, however, indicate how they're related. So it just establishes there is a relationship, but it doesn't explain how they're related. The second step involves determining genealogical coherence. Okay. The researcher examines all the variant units in which the two closely related witnesses disagree, looking for variant units in which it's fairly obvious which reading is prior to the other. For example, in the Book of Acts, Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus have different readings in 586 variant units. Vaticanus has the prior reading 328 times. Sinaiticus has the prior reading 192 times. In 52 variant units, the researchers were unable to determine which reading was prior. So they were not sure only on 52 variants. In 14 variant units, the two texts have readings that seem to be unrelated to each other. i.e. neither reading is apparently derived from the other. Since Vaticanus had the... See, I can imagine eventually in Logos that Logos will have all this, where just as we were showing the English variants and all that stuff, variations, it'll do that as well, and that'd be a lot easier for me to visualize than all this math. Oh, good. They got after determining which texts are most closely related and how they're related, a general text flow can be composed. The text flow shows the earliest text, its immediate descendants, their descendants, and so forth. Here's the top portion of the general text flow for the book of Acts. So you got the book of Acts, and you got the manuscripts right here. The CGBM offers solutions to the two major problems that Westcott and Hort identified that prevented construction of an accurate genealogy of texts: accidental coincidences and mixture. The architects of the CBGM used the expression multiple emergence and coincidental agreement to refer to scribes independently making the same error in their respective copies so that they agreed on a reading, even though the agreement was not drawn from a shared ancestor. It's like you have two people that come to the same thought, but they're not connected in any type of way. They used a contamination to refer to what Westcott and Hort called mixture. Contamination results from a scribe occasionally consulting another exemplar. Exemplar is the manuscript that you're copying from, with different readings from his primary exemplar. Ordinarily, witnesses that share the same reading should form a coherent chain. Each witness should have derived its reading from one of its close relatives. However, there are breaks in the coherence chain. That is, if witnesses that are not closely related share the same reading, this suggests that the shared reading is a result of multiple emergence or contamination. Multiple emergence is more likely in cases, and the reading can be explained as a common accidental error. Contamination is more likely in other cases. Here's the impact of it. Let me get a drink of water. The impact of the CBGM. The application of the CGBM is changing and will continue to change the text of the standard critical editions of the Greek New Testament, the Netzel Allen and the UBS text. The method resulted in changing the reading of 33 passages in the NA28 and UBS 5. Yeah, there's another Greek text that I don't have. I think it's a Tyndale or whatever. It does some of this, I think. I can't remember. Compared to previous editions, some of these changes impact the meaning of the passages, and some are also theologically significant. For example, the text of Jude 5, pseudonym, thank you. I've seen people say there's a code in the Bible. The verses mean the base on a number of letters, etc. Is that pro KJV or not? Well, you bring up a good question, because pseudonym, if you believe that there's a Bible code, right? Is the Bible code in English or is it in Greek and Hebrew? I don't believe in Bible codes, but if you believed that the King James was inspired, or perhaps even providential, then you might recognize certain things, you know, certain patterns and other issues like that. I first read, there was a book, it was actually called the Bible Code. I read the fiction book and I read the non-fiction book. I read this book, I can't remember if it was before 9/11 or after. Might have been both. There's a regular book and there's a fictional book based off of it. Yeah, Michael Dronzin, the Bible Code book. Okay. I've read this book, but whenever I finally, and remember, I didn't start learning the languages till 2006. But when I found out about the concept of textual variants, I was like, there's no way a Bible code could be possible, because you have variants, and if you have variants, it's going to throw off the code. So you could check it out. You could check it out. Yeah, this deals with the movie as well. Yeah, I don't accept the Bible code arguments. And there's variations of it. There's more scholarly type stuff too, but I don't accept it. Essentially, if you have enough data, it's only a matter of time before what was unintentional or random, it would seem like, meaning that the standard wasn't, the connection wasn't supposed to be made. It's only a matter of time before patterns develop. Because in randomness, you have a limited amount of options, you know. Yeah, Josh C, I'm skeptic of all of that stuff. But anyway, some of the impact of the meaning of the past, some are also theologically significant. For example, the text of Jude 5 in the previous edition read, although the Lord, Kurios, once saved his entire people out of the land of Egypt. However, the NH28 and UBS 5 read, although Jesus once saved his entire people out of the land of Egypt. The Revised reading affirms Jesus' identity as the Lord who accomplished the Exodus. Jude 4 identifies Jesus as our Lord. Jude 5 demonstrates the Lord has his highest sense. Get a heartburn pill. It functions not merely as a title of authority, but as a name of deity. A future volume of the Ethical Critical Mayor, as produced by the application of the CBGM, continues. New changes will come to other passages in other books and incorporate the New Testament. So, summary. One second. Tokenomics, you're talking like a rocket scientist over there right now. So I'm gonna put that one on the shelf. Maybe in the future I'll have a debate about that. Summary. Although the CBGM can be difficult to understand, it essentially fulfills the vision of Westcott and Hort. The CBGM seeks to construct a genealogy of texts. This method has been applied to the Catholic letters, Acts and Mark, and will ultimately be applied to the entire New Testament. The method has the potential to improve the accuracy of the critical editions of the Greek New Testament. Reflection questions. So, let's see. That's overall, but that's where they left off. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, there's so many disciplines involved. Let's see. We got the coherence thing. More prominent still is the method. This is a theological journal, Estes, textual critical methods. Yeah, let's look at this one. Let's see what year this is. Yeah, these are Dictionary of Jesus and the Gospels. 2013. Okay. Texture harmonization. Hopefully, yeah. New methods, journals, 2016. Texture criticism. Engage in the New Testament. Short introduction. Let's see who this is. I don't have that one. A User's Guide to the Nestle Island Greek New Testament. I have that on my bookshelf. Is that in Logos? Oh, I have that. I forgot I had this in Logos. So yeah, he's got a discussion of CGBM right there. Textual criticism of the Bible, revised. So this is the Bible Revised Edition. This is 2018. This is Mangum. Modern critical editions, different approaches to Greek texts. Yeah, this is the one I don't think I have. The Great New Testament by Tyndale House. I don't think I have that one. Let me see how much that one is. Oh, I do own it. I just haven't used it. I need to use it. All right. How to do New Testament criticism. Cool. Oh, this is helpful. Man, when I had to do this stuff by hand, it was a pain in the butt. I had to use it for my, my apparatuses. I mean, I'll show y'all. Y'all probably seen this stuff. I mean, some people already know all about this. So this is the NA27. Okay, I got the NA28 in Logos, and I can show y'all stuff on program. But all that stuff in the bottom is all these symbols. I'll bring this up in my computer in a second. But you have this little bitty card. Okay, and this is your key. And it has the manuscripts. And I don't even think it has everything, because I had to get I had it earlier. And then this is Hebrew. The light messes up. At the bottom, the apparatuses. Anyway, what I was trying to show y'all is that, which I'll bring up some resources so you can see this when I'm showing y'all. Like I said, some of you already know about this stuff, but I'm trying to think about, my journey, things I was exposed to, and, trying to recreate some of that. So probably Gordon Fee. I think the first exegesis book I read was Gorman exegesis, but I can't remember if he goes into talking about the textual criticism. So criticism. Step 5, textual criticism. No, that's not what I want. See, writing an exegesis paper, a schematic, like how do you do all that stuff? Establish the text. Here it is. To do your own text criticism, you need to become familiar with the apparatus's textual information in the footnotes of both the NA27 UBS full. A full explanation of use of the apparatus discussion card was given in 1.2. All right, so here is that section. These are different textual variants. Okay. So this is what it looks like in book form, what I was showing y'all right here. This stuff along the side, if David Preston ever used this, he would love it, because these are what are called allusions or echoes. And so this is whenever these occur, is when it has an exclamation point, it's an allusion to the Septuagint, a quote or whatever. So you got that on the side. Then you have the manuscript evidence. So this is, I think this is is this the NA20? I think it's the 27. So you got the manuscripts, right? And Logos makes all this easy because everything is keyed. I'm just showing you how it looks in book form. And then you have like the variants, right? The readings, and then the number, and then the sources. Now I'm going to show you the UBS also because it has a rating. But let's see if I can find the UBS. Well, where's the UBS? It should be showing you the UBS also. It's only showing you the NA27. All right, so let me just show you the NA20. What it looks like in Logos. All right. Okay, I gotta turn all this stuff off. I don't need any of that. I wish there was a switch I could just flip. Okay, so this is the NA28, and so you're going through and like you see this asterisk right here, it makes a 2, a 12, Psalms 3. It's given those allusions that we saw on the side, but also you'll have these other symbols like this circle, and it's giving you a variant reading there. These brackets are letting you know things. All of these things have, you got to learn the code. That's what this is so cool, because it has this here. Now, this is also at the beginning of the NA28 in the discussion. And I think it's in either the introduction, the critical apparatus. So all this information is there, but there's other books to help you learn how to use it. But the cool thing about Logos is, like, I'll bring up what the critical apparatus looks like. This is that when I'm showing y'all. Wait, where to go? I'm showing y'all this right here, but it looks different in Logos because it's lined up like this. So you got this statement, and then it has the German, and then it says the words enclosed between these brackets are transmitted with variants. And then it has all of this information. And as soon as I click on the symbol, I can know this is Sinaiticus. Number 2, I think that means second corrector. I'm not sure. And you can just go through all of that stuff. And so that makes the NA28 very easy to use in Logos. I usually use the UBS 5 because it has a different system. Even though it has the same text, it has a different system. And I need to show you a visual because I don't know why it's not showing me the different readings for the UBS. But that's all right. I'll show you another book that I use to help me. It's Erickson. Taken to Fear. I showed y'all this a while ago in book form, but I'll pull it up again. These are books I read early on. A Beginner's Guide to New Testament Exegesis, Taken to Fear at a Critical Method. And then let's just go to the textual criticism portion. Textual criticism. So he's going to give you a page from the NA27, and then he's going to give the UBS 4. Figures 2-1. So here's the NA27, right? That's what, and here's the UBS. The UBS does something different. The UBS gives ratings. So you have an A reading, which means the reading is certain. B reading, people are divided on it, and you got a C reading and things like that. I can't remember the exact readings scale it is. But that helps simplify things because the NA28 gives you more information, but that rating helps you because it lets you see how the translation committee dealt with those things or their decision. Now, the beautiful thing about Logos is if I click in Exegetical Guide, and let's say I'm in, I don't know, let's just do John 1:18. I know there's a textual critical issue there. So I click that, and all this stuff pops up, but underneath textual variants, my textual commentaries are there. Lexham textual notes of the Bible, a textual guide to New Testament, a Metzger. All of these different ones come up, and then all the different apparatuses. So where I would have to spend hours flipping through books and learning codes and all this, I merely have to hover over this stuff. And so you can see, did I do it right? Yeah, I think I did. You can see that 118, Harmonoges, Weos, what argument, what manuscripts are here. There's a difference in readings there and all of that stuff. I'm still rusty on it, but I mean, I can dive into it. But anyway. Let me go back. And since we're on textual criticism stuff, I want to show you. Let's see. One more. Let's bring up Bach and Fanning. This is a good book as far as for theological, exegetical method. This is Dallas Theological Seminary. So you can look at the context, exegetical methods and procedures, grammatical analysis, sentence diagramming, lexical analysis, background studies. There's different things. You got causal layouts, exegetical outlining. I've used all these in seminary. And then textual criticism. Where are you? Let me do it. Textual criticism. Yeah, there it is right there. Laying a foundation. And Wallace wrote this section. Yeah, so he does a good discussion of this. Goes a little bit through the manuscripts. The different methods. So you got the different schools right here. As you can see, this entry is very similar to the one we read in that other book. Yeah, it goes through the practices and the steps. So eventually, you know, you start. I've read a lot of these books over the years, and basically they make different tweaks. Genealogical solidarity. That's kind of like where that stuff we were talking about earlier, distribution, all of those things like that. So that's a good chapter on textual criticism. I need to go back and what it's CGBTM. Hey, Kevin. So let me just, instead of fishing out there in Logos land, let's only pick the books I have that mention it. Okay. So that method is mentioned in all these. It's the Baylor Handbook, the Tyndale Evaluation. How we got the New Testament, Stanley Porter, text, transmission, translation. That'd be a good one. Oh yeah, the intermediate grammar. That's also like a workbook too, of Plummer, Kostenberger, and Merkel. They got textual criticism stuff in it too. That's the first one. This is the revised edition. I'll show you all that real quick. Principles of textual criticism. The history of textual criticism. Yeah. So the table of contents. Discussion, Greek language and textual criticism. They might have updated this one too. Favor the older manuscripts. Here's the map. Western, Byzantine, Alexandrian, Caesarean. There's the coherent stuff. Common variations. Intentional errors. Understanding textual apparatuses and tools. That's what I was just showing y'all right now. They're talking about collation. Recent trends in textual criticism. Theological consideration. Here's some websites they recommend. So yeah, there's a lot of good resources and stuff. 1 second. I got a notification on my phone. All right. Let's see what else we have. BibSac, that's Dallas Theological Seminary. Editorial Critical Mayor. That's where I could go there and read about that resource. Novel Testamentum Grassum, Editorial Critical Mayor. Oh, I've seen this. Well, it's not fully done yet. Yeah, the claim is recording all the variants found in the requires some nuances. Yeah, it's huge. I've seen it before in book form. If this is the same one I saw, it's huge. But now they're taking that information and doing the coherence-based stuff. Okay. You can see that some of the journal article, the commentaries are mentioning it. Daily Dose of Greek, which is Plummer, Deeper Greek, they're talking about it. This Revelation commentary is talking about it. So a lot of different stuff in that particular theory. So what I need to do is I need to find arguments against that theory. Why should we be skeptic of such theory as that? Now I know what's his name is not debating this or whatever, but the way that I motivate myself to study is I overlearn. I feed my passion. And of course, you got to limit your focus or whatever. But you got coherence-based genealogical method. Let's put criticisms next to it. And now let's put Daniel Wallace, and let's see what Wallace says about it. Book notice. A new approach to textual criticism, introduction to coherence-based genealogical method. Published by SBL. Alrighty. Did he write it? No, I have this book though, I think. A new approach to textual criticism. Are you going to give me any criticisms? I need a little bit more than that, Wallace. Jeffrey Riddle at Academia. The coherence-based genealogical method, the newest method in Trinitarian by the Quarterly Record 2021. All right, so Trinitarian Bible Society, Editor's Director, Old New Method. What is CGBM? What is new about it in modern texts thus far? Evaluation. Yeah, I want the evaluation part. So let's zoom in. Here are 6 critiques of the CBGM. First, the CBGM use of computer digital technology does not eliminate human subjectivity in its application. The CBGM is not free from human subjectivity. Klaus Wachtel concedes that the data produced by CBGM must in the end be subjectively interpreted, and that other scholars starting from different premises will come to different conclusions. Peter Gurry likewise notes that the results provided by CBGM, like all textual critic data, have to be weighed and interpreted by a human. Second, the CBGM is not exempt from the charge of circular reasoning. Scholars tend to reach outcomes based on their initial presuppositions, circular reasoning. Though the CBGM has ostensibly abandoned the traditional text types, the scholars using the method still appear to presuppose the Alexandrian readings are generally superior and take this as their initial text. Third, CGBM abandons any hope of ever recovering an original autograph. CBGM claims only to recover the initial text. It makes clear that this initial text must not necessarily be equated with the authorial text, the autograph. Recovery of the autograph is seen as both unattainable and undesirable. Bart Ehrman was among the first to suggest the need to move beyond the narrow concern for the autographs and instead focus on the history of the transmission of the text, a history that could serve a window into the social world of early Christianity. Most modern text critics no longer speak of recovering the autograph, but of tracing the reception history of disputed passage. There's no concern to establish a standard and stable text to serve as a firm basis for confessional Christianity. Fourth, the CBGM does not make use of patristic or versional evidence. Okay. The CBGM does not generally incorporate into its textual flow diagram evidence from patristic writings, the church fathers, or early translations like Old Latin, Syriac, etc. In some cases, however, this data may be crucial. The traditional ending of Mark 16, for example, is cited by Justin Martyr and Irenaeus of Lyon in the 2nd century. To exclude the evidence weakens a strong argument in favor of Mark's ending. Okay. Fifth, the CBGM allows for conjectural emendation, which I never like. I don't like when it's done in Hebrew. The incorporation of readings supported by no extant Greek manuscript. It's like when you come up with a theoretical reading. We have noted the conjectural emendation in 2 Peter 3:10. What will be the result when the CBM is applied to the entire New Testament? How many more conjectures will be made? What doctrines will be affected? And that's fine if you put it in the commentary section and you make commentaries on it, but people need to be taught how that works. 6, the CBGM is being used by only a very small number of scholars, primarily in one German academic institute. It has been observed that modern text criticism has attempted to take the text of the Bible out of the hands of the church and to place it into the hands of the academy. Now it appears that modern text has been taken out of the hands of the larger academy and placed into the hands of an even smaller circle in Munster. What's on the horizon? CBGM's influence has only just begun. This person has apparently suggested that NA29 will appear in 2022. Well, now you're making me wonder if it came out. Nestle Allen 29. Am I using the NA29? I can't even remember. UBS 6? Golly, man. It's hard to keep up. In a recent post, Evangelical Textual Criticism blog, Peter Gurry shared some notes that he took at SBL Denver 2018 about the plans for the next edition of the NA29. Okay, so it's not out there. It'll share the same editorial committee. I'll save this and read it for later, but it hasn't came out yet, if I'm understanding that correctly. All right. The new edition will expand the CGBM application to Acts, at least one other book, probably marked CBGM hopes to be applied to the entire New Testament by the 2030s. CGBM, the end of modern textual criticism. The CBGM's emergence as the newest new method has been both consequential and controversial. When the editorial critica major process is complete and the CBGM has been applied to the entire Greek New Testament, will this be the end of modern text criticism? Let me blow this up. Uh-oh. I need to see it in a better size. Okay. see if I can blow this up more. Yeah, there we go. About right here. The CBGM's emergence as the newest new method has been both consequential and controversial. I already read that. Would this be the end of modern text criticism? Absolutely not. We can be sure that an even newer new method will eventually. Hey, pseudonym. Is a frame trap a type of prophecy? I don't know what you mean by frame trap, a type of prophecy. Explain what you mean by that. Yeah, raising the dead. It says, the proponents of modern text criticism now declare that the goal of ever reconstructing a definitive autograph is only a chimera, a thing hoped or wished for, but which always remains illusory or impossible to achieve. Many evangelicals have surrendered assurance to ever known with full confidence what the text of the Word of God is. Daniel B. Wallace has written, we do not have now in our critical Greek text or any translation exactly what the authors of the New Testament wrote. Even if we did, we would not know it. Such a perspective completely undermines the epistemological foundations of the Christian faith. If we do not know what the Bible is, we cannot know what the Bible says. There is an alternative CBGM into the ever-changing method and text of modern criticism. It is to hold fast to the received text, faithfully preserved by God and kept per in all ages. As the new method rise and fall, we can look to an old text that is solid, stable, and unchanging. The old is indeed better. So this guy at Academia.edu, Jeffrey Riddle, is in the same view as Nick Sayers. So let's just do this. Jeffrey T. Riddle. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I see you. All right, Nick. I just found you on Twitter. Okay. Jeff Riddle. This is his site. I've never heard of Jeff Riddle. Has he debated on SFT's channel, I wonder? So the Young Texas and Reform. Word Magazine by Jeff Riddle. Texas. Here's your link to your website. Okay, so this looks like a site. Paul Whalen. Why the King James? Defending the historic view of the Holy Scriptures. Has the CGBM gotten us to 125 AD? Is a frame trap a type? I don't understand what you're saying. Frame trap a type of prophecy. All right, so this site looks interesting. So Dr. Jeff Riddle. All right, so now it makes me want to look for this Dr. Jeff Riddle on let's see if we can find him on YouTube. Word Magazine. Okay. To Decker. That's Rodney Decker, I guess. Reading and Misreading Turretin, Usher, Baxter, and Owen. the resurrection of Mark's ending, the case for the received text, Dr. Jeff Riddle, text and translation, okay, Trinitarian Bible Society. Need to subscribe to that one also. James White's disrespect of Jeff Riddle, okay, TR Onlyism and Dr. Jeff Riddle. The position of Jeff Riddle and the implications. James Snap visits St. I listened to this earlier. Not really. From critical text to majority text interview, that might be a good one for me. I don't think I'll get to it this time. Dr. Jeff Riddle. Dwayne Green responds to variants in the traditional text. Okay. So I get exposing. Oh, there's Joshua Gibbs. The confessional canonical text with Jeff Riddle. Is the text settled or under construction? He's one of the early free grace debaters on SFT's channel. But he's too, I don't know what he's doing. He's too busy. Let's see if he's ever been on SFT. Standing for truth. I guess not. Okay, so this is good. I got Nick Sayers, Texas Receptus guy. I got this Jeff Riddle, Texas Receptus guy. I need to know more people that are more in line with Will Kinney. But, you know, that's fine. I'm getting an idea of, you know, some of the names that are out there. When is the discussion with Will happening? Well, let me check. Let me check my email. 1 second. Let's see here. We had to reschedule. It looks... Let's go. Okay. Let's see. All right. So, Will Kinney has a debate on the 28th with James Snap. How about we just move it? No, that's July. Goodness gracious. Where are we at? I'm going to have to ask SFT. I'm thinking it's August 7th. I'm gonna look on SFT site. But sometimes SFT don't reschedule it immediately. So let's see. There's the Snap one. Upcoming live streams. This says August 17th. I don't know if that's the change date or not. I can't remember now. I think it was, but it's going to be in August. Now, there's another debate that I have with a Catholic. And I don't think SFT's made a thumbnail for that one yet. Let's see. Oh, this was on my birthday. Cool. The Crossless Gospel. That's going to be debated on my birthday. So I'm going to have to set up an after show for that. It doesn't look like my debate, my other debate is listed up here yet. Well, guys, I need to get up and let's see. It's 2 a.m. here. I got to get up. I got to be at work at 7. So wake up 5:30. 2, 3, 4, 5. I got to wake up about 3 hours. But it was good to go through some of those things with y'all. And I'm just skimming the comments right now. Let's see here. Y'all are talking about the Peshitta and all that stuff. Syriac. Yeah. Hi, Bible student KJV. I'm just looking good. England 7. Kevin, I haven't made any decisions on texture criticism. I mean, I don't. Do I think the TR and Byzantine are the most reliable? No, I don't. I haven't made a decision. Right now, I'm even open hypothetically to a preservation view of the King James or Texas Receptus. That's how open I am on that stuff. I don't believe my cessationism won't allow me to go with some forms of King James onlyism, though. All right. Okay, guys, I'll study these comments later on. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and land the plane. Y'all have a good night. God bless. Check out more content, old stuff, new stuff. God bless.